and I'm just going to hang on till we start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do your thing.
There we go. It's like, okay. There we go. We're live.
Ready?
Yep, we're
All
live.
right. Wait a minute or two, see who logs in.
Yeah, I just need to, well, yeah, and I need a couple of extra things here.
Always some housekeeping to do, right?
Yep, for sure. But it's all good. Welcome, everybody. Welcome.
Welcome to another terrifying marathon of cigar debate. Right? It's an all-nighter.
Always. All
Yeah.
right. All right, here we go. Cool, cool. Jesus. I know I should stop complaining, but man, it's fucking cold here. All
Yeah,
right.
it's I can feel it getting colder here, but you know what? We're going to power through it because we're professionals.
Absolutely. I got a warm cup of coffee. Not sure how warm it'll stay, but we'll do it. All
I got
right.
my thermos of hot tea right next to me, so I'm right there with you.
Jay Davis says he only has 4.5 hours, so make it quick. Yeah, I've
Exactly.
got a doctor's appointment for my new baby tomorrow morning too. Like 7:30, I think. I'm just like, okay. May not
You're
even go
gonna
to s-
pay. You're gonna pay for this tomorrow.
may not even go to sleep. That's
There you go.
that's a fact. So, all right. Here we go. Recording. Yep. Rocket. All right. Let's count her down in five, four, three, two, one. Good evening and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 316th take live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studio of Azle, Texas. I'm your host, Barry Duplessis, as always, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. This is going to be a fantastic show. Our top 10 cigars of 2024 is here, and we are continuing a tradition that we started 2 years ago. This will be our third time doing this, and I'm so excited that my special guest host has agreed to join me again for a third time tonight. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to introducing him and to talk about some of the best cigars that I smoked in 2024. So welcome everybody. But before we get to formal introductions of our guests of honor, we do have to thank the people that make this show possible. That, of course, is our sponsors. Tonight's show is sponsored by Drew Estate. Drew Estate's at it again, adding to their variable portfolio with the new broadleaf Gordo for Nica Rustica. Yes, that's right. The Nica Rustica is now available in a Gordo size, 6x60. While certain packaging elements have changed throughout the years, the Nica Rustica brand proudly remains Drew Estate's tribute to the people of Esteli. Moreover, Nica Rustica Broadleaf Blend remains unchanged, preserving its rustic, spicy, and robust flavor profile, and always at an affordable price. Nica Rustica Broadleaf is wrapped in a Connecticut River Valley wrapper, San Andreas binder, and contains Nicaraguan fillers from Esteli and Jalapa. Considered a straightforward power puncher, the new Gordo 6x60 is a big cigar with big, flat flavors. It's just a flavor bomb, exclaims Jonathan Drew, founder and president of Drew Estate. So check out your Drew Diplomat retailer today for the all-new Nica Rustica Broadleaf Gordo 6x60. And you can always check them out at some great purveyors as well of Drew Estate, and or any Drew Diplomat retailer as well. So welcome everybody. Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by some of our friends. If you are listening to us live here on Facebook Live, where we broadcast typically every Sunday night at 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern, or you catch us later on podcasts, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or wherever you listen to podcasts, including iHeartRadio. You are listening to us courtesy of Grand Habano Cigars. Our audio broadcast is always brought to you by our friends at Grand Habano Cigars. Compassionate, great cigars. Be sure to download, subscribe, and review today. Thanks to our good friends at Grand Habano Cigars. And our our video broadcast. You can always check us out on YouTube later on. Our YouTube channel is sponsored by Foundation Cigars. Yes, after with over 20 years of love and dedication in the industry, Nick Melillo merges old world traditions with modern day styles and customs to produce unique premium cigars. Their values of the Foundation Cigar Company are quality, consistency, balance, and flavor. So check out our YouTube channel today. Hit the subscribe button. And thanks to our good friends at Foundation Cigar Company. And welcome, everybody. This is our 316th take. So without further ado, we'll introduce tonight's guest host, sponsored by United Cigar. Smoke once a night and smoke once a day and start living united. Mr. George Brightman. George, how you doing tonight?
Fantastic, man. Glad to be here with you again. Looking forward to tonight. I'm honored that you asked me back. I'm a little bit rusty. Just because I haven't been smoking very much, so I have a very clean palate for today. But
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I'm excited. And by the way, I love it's like it's a Christmas thing that I look forward to getting your package, right? In other words, I get that and I immediately I open it up and I kind of eyeball, but then I lay them down in the rest humidor. So they're in peak smoking condition when we decide to get this underway, and that's it's a cool exercise, and I'm always excited, and this I'm excited to get other people's point of view about the things that are out there, what constitutes the Blue Ribbon Prize winners. And I like the fact that as we scan the cigar horizon, there are all kinds of takes on this. But so I got to tell you, it's 10:30 here. I'm excited to start smoking. So can we light up?
Absolutely. So really quick, we're going to get into all the rules and regulations and everything like that. For just to recap what George was talking about, send out a package to him every year, and I give him my top 10 cigars. The trick is, I take everything off, all labels, all identifying marks whatsoever. Well, within reason. Sometimes, Cavalier of Geneva a couple of years ago kind of gave it away a little bit with their standard gold leaf. But other than that, we try to remove all identifying marks to the cigars. I put them in little bags with some humidification pouches, of course, labeling them number 10, number 9, etc. And George goes through them, gives us his honest opinion. He's already smoked a few. We're going to smoke a little bit more tonight. So, George, you've already
Yeah.
smoked numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So since you've smoked nine, I have number 9 here. We talked about this a little bit before we started the show. I'm gonna light up number 9 too. We're gonna talk a little bit about that as we kind of counterpoint or agree or
Yeah,
disagree on it. So.
right, exactly. We'll because it's relatively fresh in my mind. You have my comments in front of you, so you can remind me or
Mhm,
correct me. But I'm going to smoke number 3,
mhm.
which is this. It's a lovely. This is a classic robusto with a really beautiful blonde wrapper, and it has a nice earthy floral in terms of aroma, in a lot of ways, it reminds me of old school Honduran cigars. But anyway, I'm not I don't want to I'm not trying to guess anything. I just want to light it up. But
Sure.
I'm excited to do this.
Sounds great. Number 9 is actually a Robusto too. And speaking of your comments, you commented on how gorgeous you thought it was from an
Yeah,
appearance standpoint, and I can't agree more.
yeah,
I think it's a gorgeous looking cigar. Very not very toothy at all. Visible veins, yes. There's a little bit to a nice sheen to it as well. It's a
yeah.
5 by 50, also traditional size. Um,
Mhm.
we're going to have some traditional sizes. We're going to have some non-traditional sizes tonight. So, but we'll go ahead and light up and kind of get into this here. So, and that'll take us. That'll obviously take us into tonight's major point, which is always brought to you by Gran Habano Cigars. Yes, Gran Habano Cigars. From the fertile lands of Honduras, George Rico. George just mentioned the Honduras, but George Rico and his family have put together the very best vintages for you. Yes, you, the cigar smoker, from value-based hits like Corojo Number 5 to the award-winning 20th anniversary to special projects like Zulu Zulu. Gran Habano is about cultivating the best and making pinnacle cigars for the market. Culture, tradition, quality, premium handcrafted Gran Habano cigars. And it was actually last year that Gran Habano actually was the number one award winner for 2023, and cigar that obviously I enjoyed, but you enjoyed as well too, and it was
Yeah.
also a Robusto format too, a little bit different. I think I think that it's like 5 1/4, but I mean, we're splitting hairs at that point. So let's go ahead and light up. I'm sure you've already gotten there.
But
Um,
also, yeah, I did. I just lit up because I was excited to get started. But am I recalling wrong? I thought last year's Robusto was also a little bit bigger ring gauge. In other words,
mhm.
I think I might have called it like a Bahique size because I thought it was
Yeah.
like 52 by 5 1/4, something like that. It was a very modern take on a Robusto, whereas what you and I both are lighting up now, even though they're different cigars, you've got 9 and I've got 3. These are traditional.
It absolutely is it's a bigger gauge. So, it's the El Sueño size specifically,
Mm-hmm.
for the Gran Habano 20th Aniversario Edición Limitada. But yeah, I mean, it's been no secret over the last, few years. I mean, you're gonna see some varying formats in this top 10, as you've seen, George. But
Yeah.
I typically do prefer smaller formats, but there might be a couple surprises here and there. I was surprised too this year with a couple of the vitolas um, trudging along as they did in the top 10 as much as they did, considering I've been pretty vocal about certain vitolas not doing well, personally for me, and so I was kind of surprised on some on how some of these actually fell. So that was pretty cool
Well, but
as well.
so what that indicates is that you're more open, right? In other words, if you have an inherent bias, whether it's, listen, it's at this point in your lives and your smoking experience, your biases or tendencies or preferences, something as simple as that, are earned. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that by any means, but there's always the possibility that somebody is going to make a cigar that falls completely outside the bounds of what you automatically want to pick up. Like, if there's 10 lying on a counter and you're looking at them and you go, okay, I want to smoke these three because I like the look of them, the feel, the size, everything else. And then there's one that's this super oddball. But the person that you're hanging out with goes, no, you got to smoke that cigar because it's
Right.
phenomenal. If it's somebody that I trust, absolutely, I'm interested in doing that. Now,
Hmm.
am I inclined to give it a break? No, I'm not. In fact, the more somebody hypes a cigar, the more they build it up, the more they tell me that it's, you know, the best thing since sliced bread, the more skeptical I am.
Yeah, I think well, hyping cigars has just been a problem historically for me, and I always bring up this story when the Drew Estate Undercrown first came out. Like I was so excited about that cigar. Again, this is
Mhm.
well over a decade ago at this point, but I was so excited for the cigar, so excited, and
Closer to 15 years.
yeah, I pumped it up so much in my head that it just like
Yeah.
didn't hit for me, just didn't hit for me at all, and
Well,
um,
and if you're talking about the first generation, right? The first generation of Underground,
right, right.
they burn like a trash fire. So it didn't matter whether you liked them or not. There was a problem.
I got there
But they were,
eventually with it. Yeah, I got there eventually with
yeah.
it. And when they released the Sun Grown years later, of course they did the Shade first, then the Sun Grown. I really enjoyed that, and I was so sad when they discontinued it. But you know, that's business. You gotta, apparently I was the only one buying them, I guess. So
I don't, I don't, I don't think so. I don't think so. But I think you have to consider it's about how something is marketed. So don't
true.
forget. And by the way, you cut me off anytime that you want if we're going off topic. But if you think about that cigar, Underground was built as the love child of the factory, and it's
Hmm.
their regular production meets Liga Privada, right? In other words, it's the story that everybody is familiar with is that the guys in the factory were smoking, because they loved it so much, they were smoking the Liga Privada,
Hmm.
and there weren't enough to ship to accounts. So, okay, you can't smoke them anymore, but you can use the tobaccos at the factory to make whatever you want. And they came up with that. So, having said that, the cigar that came out that sort of put Underground on the map as a real tool for Drew Estate to wrap their arms around some retailers, right? And thereby reach a new swath of consumers. The Sun Grown is wandering too far off the reservation in that. It's a superior cigar and a superior blend because that tobacco was absolutely beautiful. But the look of the cigar did not say the same thing that the
Hmm.
classic Underground did.
Yeah. No, I get no, I that makes a lot more sense actually when you think about it from that point of view. Um,
So
but yeah,
the thing is that you have to organize subscription cigar societies for that. You have to recruit, your 100 closest friends that have similar taste and say, okay, everybody's got to commit to buying 150 or 200 of these cigars, and we're going to get them made and shipped to one retailer, and we can all buy them from them.
yeah, there you go. That sounds good. Yeah, I mean they obviously own the blend, so I mean there's a lot of things that they could
Yeah.
do with it, so that'll work.
That
Um,
might fit into one of the topics that we were thinking about touching on later on,
yeah,
which is redux. But I think that before we get too far, I want you to go over the ground rules for top 10
absolutely,
again, if you don't mind.
absolutely, yeah. So this is my top 10 cigars of 2024. And I have some pretty simple criteria. There's basically seven rules that kind of that they have a cigar has to qualify for. So it is Vitola based. So we've been talking about Vitola specifically. So it's not just a blend. It has to be it's the blend and the specific Vitola that it was made for.
Right.
Number two, I have had to have smoked the cigar for the very first time in the last year and a half. So I have specific time frame that I have that's a cutoff. So you're going to see some cigars, and you can see some cigars that are maybe been on the market for years, and I just haven't had the opportunity to smoke them. I had an example of a Rocky Patel Edición Limitada that was the former Humo Jaguar winner or whatever.
Mhm.
I had never smoked that cigar. and it'd been around for over a decade, and I never smoked that cigar, and it popped up on my top 10 a few years ago, because it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Um, so
Can I ask a
there,
question
yes, sir.
on that topic really quick?
Sure.
I don't want to derail you from this, but tell me
No, it's
this,
good.
uh, um, because that's insight into sort of selection process too. How did you come across it when you did? In other words, were you just in a shop and you looked and said, "Oh my God, there it is," or did somebody say to you, "Dude, you're sleeping on this cigar. You got to search it out"?
Yeah, well, I was still working at Michael's at the time, Michael's Tobacco of Euless,
Yeah.
and we got all of a sudden we got these, we had our edges all in the same place. We had the Edge
Hmm.
Corojo, we had the Edge Nicaraguan, the Edge
Hmm.
Maduro. We had them all in the same place, and all of a sudden we had a crate of this turquoise banded Edge, and I was like, did he come out with a new Edge? Did I miss something? And no, we just happened to get a box of them, and it had been on the market for a while. I was like, what the heck is going on with this? It was totally
Yeah.
weird and random. And then COVID happened, and I just kept going back to it because I was just like, wow, this is it was just something to grab every time I went to Michael's and had Tracy's get something to the curb from me. I'm like, hey, grab me some of those Rockies, and and
Yeah, and
and
they were like all Edge, they were affordable.
yeah, yeah, and I don't, I mean, they look like an edge. I'm not sure that that's what they were. I don't think they are edges. I think it was just the way that we placed them in the humidor, the way the very basic branding of it. But
Yeah.
I thought it smoked incredible. Yeah, so I think it's just how it's come across, how I've come across stuff.
Hmm.
The Avo domain was one like that had been around for a decade, but I just didn't have
Yeah.
access to Avo. And then when we started carrying it, um, specifically, I fell in love with that blend, and then of course they discontinued
Yeah.
it. So I have like I have the touch. And I feel bad every time I do this list every year because well, at something either a company goes under or the cigar gets discontinued. There's always one in my list. And so I'm not sure how much of an honor it is to be on my top 10 because you're basically playing a little bit of roulette at some point. It's a 1 out of 10 shot that the cigar's not going to be around, or God forbid the company. So. But nevertheless, it's fun
Well,
to
but
do this.
in that way, you're doing a service to everybody out there because you're saying, okay, here it is. It's this good.
Yeah,
There's a chance that these aren't going to be around, so you better go
right,
out and grab
exactly.
them.
Yeah, no, in my
Because
luck,
the
hey, 1 out of
strategy
these
should
10.
always be right. The strategy should always be, listen and pay attention and watch and grab the things that you like because listen, you and I both know this. The best things never last. The great
Right,
cigars, they evolve. Great cigars can stay great, but they're different than what they were most of the time when we fall in love with them.
absolutely. So
So go ahead.
the third rule is very simple. The cigar can't suck. And obviously that's subjective, but that's my rule. Number four, no limited edition cigars. So no TAA editions, no shop exclusives, no one and dones are eligible for my top 10. However, we're going to talk about honorable mentions here in a second. And number five, this is very specific. A previous number one cigar winner, blend specific, cannot repeat as a winner, or appear on the list. So, for
Blend
example,
specific, meaning it could
yeah,
have been a different vitola,
correct.
but you're still gonna bring it in.
Right. So George Rico releases another Vitola of his 20th anniversary, right? In a year or two,
Mhm.
right? And he
Right.
releases another Vitola. I will obviously smoke it. I'll probably enjoy it immensely. But it won't be eligible to appear on my list because he's already won the number one for that specific blend. Even though
Mhm.
I am Vitola specific, I do allow it to come in. So this does come up too, and this hasn't come up in my brief history. Again, I've been doing this since 2017, top 10 lists, but cigars are eligible to that have not gotten top tens. Excuse me, that have not gotten number ones are eligible to come back onto the list or to even win in subsequent years. It's kind of similar to Cigar Aficionado, but not really with the Le Bijou. My father Le Bijou, 1922 box press torpedo, getting like number 15 1 year, and then like 2 years later it got number one. Kind of
Oh,
similar to
wow.
that, except for the fact that the that specific Vitola isn't eligible to come back. So, um, so for example, last year, my number three cigar of the year was the uh, Black Label Trading Company, Porcelain Robusto. The Robusto is no longer eligible for the top 10. But if James Brown says, "Hey, I'm releasing a Lancero in this regular production, blah 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 blah," that's eligible to appear on the list again. If that makes sense. So, um, a company cannot have more than one cigar in my top 10. So
Yeah.
this does create log jams. There are log jams. I mean, it's not like I don't like other cigars from these companies. Uh, um, I even said the other day I was talking to Coop. I was like, I kind of said, "Oh, this company has a problem." Because I like two cigars fits in the window for next year, and if things keep going the way they're going and they keep smoking really good over time, one of them's getting the boot. You know,
One of
if they're
them, yeah, one of them is just going to arbitrarily be
which
shoved
kind of
out.
sucks for that company, but at the same time, again, not gonna flood my list with too many cigars from the same you know company. Other
You can
comp
also include something like that in an honorable mention,
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Like that, I think if
right?
things keep going with those particular cigars, I think I'll have to mention it just because I think it's so.
Yeah, it should be acknowledged.
I think
Listen, the
so.
thing is, again, like I said, we're widely experienced,
Hmm.
maybe beyond, maybe significantly beyond the average cigar smoker, buyer, cigar store customer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and
So when you find something that fits in that level, it deserves acknowledgement, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
So, and then my last rule, number seven, this is the big one. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I call it the frequency of smoke. So basically, what this means is I've had to have the means and the opportunity and did in fact smoke these cigars frequently over time. So,
Mhm.
if I smoked a cigar yesterday, well, first of all, the time frame doesn't work. But if I smoked a cigar just
Yeah.
inside the window that they one time, it you know, it's not going to appear in my top 10. I might go back to it quite a bit, and it'll be eligible for the following year, but it's not going to appear. So these are cigars that I've smoked vast amounts of. We do this every year. So number 10, I have I've smoked a box plus one over the last year and a
Mhm.
half. That is not the least frequent. The least frequent cigar is actually number seven, but I think the number seven cigar is just that much better. So that's why I poured it through. I've only smoked a
But
box.
was that difference in frequency because of availability?
Yeah, a little bit. And
So
I
for
mean,
clarification purpose, I'm sorry, but
yeah, that's
I
fine.
think this is important to think about because I want people to think about it from their own experience too, from their own point of view. When you say that it has to have been available and you've smoked it repeatedly, how often is it that it's actually from the same box? In
I
other
mean,
words, because it's available. In other words, we're not talking about limited edition or one and done cigars, but because it's available, I feel like a cigar should be earning extra points or somehow being enhanced in the status if you have bought it on multiple occasions, maybe even
correct.
from different vendors, and had the same experience. In other
Mhm.
words, that it rang your bell the same way.
Yeah. And actually, I misspoke a second ago. Number 10 is two boxes plus one
There
total.
you go.
One box was actually purchased. The other totaling the box plus one were bought in as individuals or trios or five
Hmm.
packs and assorted
Hmm.
buying.
Hmm.
Number seven was actually just under two boxes. One box was purchased and then assorted purchases basically based on limited. So those are the two
Right.
of the lowest. Um, Number 9, 3 boxes were purchased. Number 8, 3 boxes were purchased. Number 6, 3 boxes plus a few handfuls were purchased. 5, roughly about the same. The most on the list are number 1 and number 2, which were smoked, were five and change boxes a piece of those over the last year and a half. So there's
So
that.
these are cigars that you're in. That's a great set of parameters for one thing. But that means that the cigars that we're talking about, that we are evaluating here, you're intimately familiar with. These are
Mhm.
not arbitrary. In other words, you didn't just go, "Oh wow, this is a dynamite cigar. This is such a great experience. It has to be in my top 10." This is something that has earned its way into your rotation.
Right, absolutely, 1,000%. So, and that's kind of that's the criteria. It's this very simple, 7 simple rules. And number 7 gets a lot of people because I might tell a manufacturer, I might tell someone, oh, man, I really like the cigar. And
Mhm.
they're like, well, why didn't it come up on your top 10? Well, again, availability, frequency, time frame, all these things come into
Right.
play, but frequency is the number one. So, to much to I called it, I'm probably gonna just rename this segment the William Cooper segment, because much to his chagrin, he doesn't believe in honorable mentions, but yet I still do it every year. So I have honorable mentions for that I like to mention, and it's basically come down to this, George. I think you remember. These are limited edition cigars that are ineligible for the list that I just really thought were
Mhm.
just bangers.
Yeah,
Um,
that deserved recognition, but didn't actually meet all of the selection criteria.
exactly.
By the way, Coop's countdown is 30 cigars. Yours is 10, so he has room to to put in things um, that might make your honorable mention list,
Mhm.
but wouldn't fit. It wouldn't crack the top 10.
Right.
We're That's touching on things that I think are really important to evaluate. This time of year, sorry, but I think about this a lot,
Hmm.
especially when we're coming up to this. This time of year, everybody is flooded with the best of lists. Tonight the Golden
Right.
Globes are on. Whether you believe in what their selection criteria is or not, but best of whiskey. The top 10 resorts, the best bars in the world, the greatest restaurants, but certainly in consumables, it's cigars and spirits are top of mind for a lot of people. And by the way, I think it's cool that it happens and that there's a spread of times when they're announced, because if you think about it, this is a time of year when plenty of people, not everybody, but plenty of people find themselves with a little bit more time on their hands for a personal indulgence,
Hmm.
whether it's amongst a small group of friends or just being able to sit at home and rest some. So having prompts about what are the great things that have come into the marketplace is a great reminder. But the question is how you use those tools, right? So you're in this now. You've done it. I mean, think about it. You've essentially ordained before tonight like 70 cigars, right?
Hmm.
In other words, 7 years of top tens. So that's a pretty impressive portfolio right there. But the thing is, people have short memories, right?
Right.
I always say that in when people are walking in a store, they have room for three, maybe four brand names. Forget vitolas. They have three or four brand names in their head, and maybe two are things that they're like, I'm really interested in this. Maybe one of them is a favorite that already appeals to them, and the other one could be something like, oh, this was shit, avoid it, or something like that. But that's all they got room for there, right? And so we have to be aware of that as we go through this. But the great thing is that there are a bunch of people who are offering these points of view. Now, I happen to think that a lot of them are full of shit. I'm
All right. Well,
I'm
let's
so,
get us. That's us stepping on one of our topics. So let's kind of let's before let's put a pin in that because I do want to get into that with you, George. So let's talk about the honorable mentions for this year. So I've
yeah,
got five. And so without further ado, I'll talk about them briefly here.
yeah,
And then I'll recap last year's top 10, and then we'll do numbers 10, 9, and 8, and then we'll hit on a topic
right,
as we continue to smoke our cigar here for the
yeah.
first little bit. So the first honorable mention of 2024, I thought this cigar was absolutely fantastic. I'm so disappointed that it's actually a limited edition cigar. I think they've really got to figure out how to bring this to, I don't know if it's a tobacco limitation or whatever. I'm a sucker for projects anyway that benefit the military and veterans causes and stuff like that. So that was kind of what got me in already. But I smoked this on a really filthy pallet at the PCA trade show last year, and it blew me away. Then brought it home, smoked a ton more of them, and just shout out to Oliver Nouveau and the friends at United Cigar Group. Yes, they are a sponsor of mine. That's how I got some more of these. No shame. Hashtag no receipts. United Cigar Group Gold Star Limited was an absolute sensational limited edition cigar and definitely warrants mentioning and receiving an honorable mention for this year. Uh, Additionally, this again, I noted last year that um, this particular company, Macanudo, had made a cigar that was probably my favorite cigar that I had smoked all year. Unfortunately, it was a limited edition and couldn't appear in my top 10 based on my criteria. I do have integrity, so I can't just make up a rule to
Yeah,
get it in there. And I did smoke a lot of them too, which was a damn shame. But the Macanudo Estate Reserve uh, release number one, Churchill, made it last year, and the number two is my second honorable mention this year. I don't think it was as good as the number one, um, but it was dang good, and it was unbelievable. I really enjoyed it. It was a really second great iteration on the project. There's a number three that I have yet to smoke, so I'm hoping that that still hits and is really great there as well too. We mentioned Coop a minute ago, and some limited editions do make his top 30. This cigar he was really high on, and did make an appearance in his top 30. The EP Carrillo Pledge of Allegiance 2023, I thought was a banger of a cigar. Unbelievable. I love that project too. Again, it's just coincidence that two of the three so far are geared towards charitable work and everything. I think that's kind of what initially draws me to it. Um, but they happen to be fantastic cigars too, which is great, right? If you're purchasing them. So it's kind of like the Toast Across America each year. Like, those cigars are going to be good and you're also supporting a great cause, right?
yeah.
Um, are you a fan of that series, George? I wanted to bring that up in the middle of this real quick.
Uh, okay, so just um, take under advisement. I am a huge, huge Ernie fan. If Ernie made it, I'm interested in it, and I'm predisposed to like it. Uh, just because not only do I respect him highly, but I consider him, you know, an important friend and he's just a great human being. That cigar was criminally underappreciated this year.
Okay.
So that whole series, all of the things that happened with Pledge and Allegiance, and then the Pledge of Allegiance, didn't get the love that it deserves. It's a phenomenal smoke, and he made
Yeah.
great sizes,
Yeah.
great sizes.
Absolutely.
So, but I got to say, almost everything that Ernie puts, like for me to this day, still, I love Encore. I think that's an incredible blend.
Yeah, that was
I love,
the Valiantis was my number one cigar of the year a few years back. So the same year that it got number one for Cigar Aficionado, just different size, the wrong size as I like to joke around. But
right, but
yeah,
that's okay, because look, there's a cap for every pen.
hmm
So, but that blend continues. It's just like this quiet killer. Like if I walk in some random cigar store and I look and the place is filled with a bunch of legacy brands, and I know that somebody's buying their cigars from a jobber and stuff like that. The first thing I do is look and see if they've got EPC cigars, because I know that I can pick one of those and I'm going to be happy. It's like a random cigar store drop in. You look around at the humidor and you go, okay, nobody is curating this collection. It's just a bunch of shit that's out there. If there's an EPC in it, I know I'm going to be happy.
Yeah, it's always nice to go into a humidor that you're not familiar with, and you're just like, and especially like when it's looking bleak, and you turn a
Mhm.
corner and you see something familiar, like, oh, thank God, because you're like,
Yeah.
you don't want to leave the humidor without anything in your hand, because that's just kind of,
No,
I feel
no,
rude,
no.
but
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it was a great cigar, um, and
So
I
to
was
me,
really
that
excited. Go ahead.
double honorable mention.
Yeah.
Double honorable mention for that cigar.
Yeah, I was really glad to see it appear on Coop's list. I know he was really high on it. I didn't know where it would necessarily fall, or if it would, but I was hoping that it would, and it was really great to see there. Um,
Mhm.
this was a cigar, speaking of repeats, right? We talked about the Flint Knoll
Mhm.
release from Macanudo, the number two making it this year, and then the one being last year. Another cigar that was an honorable mention last year was the Blackwork Studio Intergalactic. Um, and Blackwork Studio makes it again with Intergalactic Event Horizon, the Toro size specifically. I didn't believe people when they told me that I would like the Event Horizon better than the original, because I thought the original was incredible. I was like, man, that's a tall order.
Mhm.
And they were right. I'm here to say it. The Event Horizon's better, which is just outstanding. Um, and again, it's one of those things. It's sad to say, like, when things are limited, but I like that James does series of things. He brings stuff like Serpents and Rainbows, he brings back on an annual
Yeah.
basis and things like that. So like you
Yeah.
kind of, while they are limited cigars, sometimes they're new blends, sometimes they're reblends. We're going to talk about this here in a little bit too. But it's it you know, it it's cool to see him building on that story, but it's also sad when they're gone because you don't have any more. So um and then the last honorable mention
Makes
for
them, which
yeah,
makes smoking them all that more poignant.
yeah.
When you find them and you fall in love with them and you get them and you go, oh my God, they actually did it. They topped themselves. But that's a again that achievement is emblematic of their arc. They're just continuing to grow.
Yeah. Um, and I mean, it's no secret too. James has been on my list quite a bit. So I have a penchant for his blending style, as I do for the last honorable mention, Hector Alfonso and Eric Espinosa of Espinosa Cigars, and of course the makers of Knuckle Sandwich. My last honorable mention for 2024 is the Knuckle Sandwich Chef Special 2024, which I happen to have here. Um,
Yeah,
Box press, you know reminiscent to me. It was very reminiscent of the old ovals that were made at AJ's factory and stuff like that. The vitola itself, not the blend. The blend is much more outstanding than those ovals. But I absolutely loved the chef special this year. I was really fond of the very first one as well, but 2024 was something I thought that was truly special, and really enjoyed it. Uh, so those are our honorable mentions.
cool.
So congrats to United Cigar, Macanudo, EP Carrillo, Blackwork Studio, and the makers of Knuckle Sandwich, Espinosa Cigars. So we'll get into the top 10 right away here, and then we'll get into kind of some fun discussion topics to kind of break everything up.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
before that, let's kind of recap last year's winners. So last year, the number one cigar that we've already mentioned, of course, was the Gran Habano 20th Aniversario Edición Limitada El Sueño. The number two cigar of the year was Luciano Cigars Maria Lucia. Um, the number three was Black Label Trading Company Deliverance Porcelain Robusta. We mentioned that already as well.
yeah.
Number four was Alec Bradley Double Broadleaf Grand Corona. Number five, which I finally got to you, George. I don't know if you had a chance to smoke it, but I got you the blend, didn't get you the correct Vitola.
The
But
correct vitola.
so it was the Casa Cuevas Sangre Nueva Double Perfecto. Um, And number 6 was the Espinosa Knuckle Sandwich Connecticut Short Churchill. Number 7 was the Quesada Cigars Liga F Toro. Number 8 was the HVC Selección number 1 Natural Poderosos. Number 9 was United Toro Maduro. And number 10 was the Christoph Cigars Guardrail Robusto. That was last year's top 10 cigars. So let's kick things off with number 10 for 2024. So coming in at number 10 for 2024, let me make sure I got all this. I don't want to mess any of my notes up. Sorry for the drum roll, guys. I'm not that. Promise I'm not trying to be too cheeky here. But I do have the cigar here. Number 10, coming in at number 10, I have the Ferio Tego Suma Torpedo. It's an Ecuadorian Corojo wrap cigar, Ecuadorian Sumatran binder with fillers from Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic. It's manufactured in the Dominican Republic at Tabadex. For those of you who don't know, that's where Quesada cigars are made. It's a 6 1/4 by 52, and obviously made with Manuel Quesada, the Quesada family, and Michael Herklotz collabing to make this blend. This is the first regular production line under the Ferio Tego name, and I really liked it from the jump. It was actually the first vitola of the blend that I smoked, and frankly, when I ventured out to other vitolas, I just kept coming back to this one. So I really enjoyed it quite a bit, obviously, and so it was a cigar that had some really nice creaminess, some beautiful earthiness. I really enjoyed just the draw, every single one of them. And again, I'm George. We were talking about vitolas that I don't normally favor. I'm not a torpedo guy. I'm just not. I find that most manufacturers that make them don't know how, or don't know how to do it consistently well, and it leads to draw problems, which is where I get frustrated and stuff like that. So, but there was some beautiful minerality into it, which I kind of dig. I'm not afraid of minerality and everything, and it's just, and to me, it had very, to coin a phrase from you, and you actually mentioned this too in your thoughts on it, was it's very classic flavors. So it was something that I really enjoyed. So that's my number 10 cigar of the year, which was the Ferio Tego Suma Torpedo. But any other thoughts that you can recall, George? I got some of your notes here. You said that it came in at, when you kind of gave a score on it, you kind of popped it at an 89, 88, 89, which is a great score. But what do you recall anything specifically stand out about it?
Number one, I think it's a beautiful cigar. It feels good in your hand. You look at it and you can't wait to get into that cigar. But I would say that my final pronouncement about that cigar is that it is very elegant, and it is a really old-fashioned blend to me, which is that's high praise, right? In other words, the classic Dominican construction, the way you build a cigar to achieve a personality and express itself as you go is it's not celebrated enough. That cigar, I love Suma too, but I like exploring the vitolas, but that is a beautiful, elegant, and yeah, I'm pretty sure that in my notes I told you about the minerality, and that I thought the middle portion of the cigar was a little bit linear. But again, that was very classic in the way that it was developing. The finish of that cigar was beautiful. And now I think it's important for me to say, especially the way I've been recently, 89 is a great score in my opinion. Anybody that thinks that you shouldn't get excited about a cigar unless it gets a 90 or over is full of shit. They don't understand the parameters of what's going on in cigar making. 89 is an extraordinary accomplishment because there aren't that many cigar makers that hit that.
Yeah, I frequently like I'll tell people this all the time when I rate a cigar. If I say that your cigar is about 88, 8 or 9, that's a cigar I'm going back to. And going back to frequently.
Mhm.
I I have a reputation on the Cigar Coop Roundtable of having being a little bit tougher of a scorer. Um, I like you, George, I don't hand out Halloween candy. Um,
Exactly. I'm not
and
doing it.
and there might be a blend, there might be a time that, and this has happened recently too, where there was a blend that I really, really enjoyed and smoked quite a bit of. And and for that particular cigar, that particular round table, that particular moment, it didn't smoke
Didn't
to the
hit.
level
Right.
of my other experiences. So it got docked a point or two. And that's again,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean I hate it. It doesn't mean I'm not going back to it. I'm absolutely going back to it. But absolutely, I've got to try to keep as an honest level head about some of this as much as possible. I mean,
Yeah.
and what's really great, worthy of note about the Suma specifically for Michael Herklotz too, is like when he handed me my first one, he was joking around with everybody at that trade show. They had spent, 72 hours in a UPS container truck in the middle of Vegas in the middle of summer. Like,
It's summer.
I mean, that's,
Summertime.
yeah, it was,
The,
just
the,
awful kind of experience
the
for a
initial,
cigar.
the initial, right. The initial presentation was brutal. It was handicapped by the circumstances,
Hmm.
right? Not to mention that you don't get to appreciate the aroma of that cigar when you're smoking it on the trade show floor
Right.
amongst, 3,000 other cigars that are being smoked at the same time.
Exactly.
um,
Exactly. So,
so
well, that's, so
I
that's, go ahead.
Stuma earns its status. It deserves it, and it does it time and again.
Absolutely. So
So,
that's a great segue though. We were talking about PCA trade, so cigars, and number 9, which is the cigar that I'm smoking now, was a
mhm,
cigar that I enjoyed from the first time that I smoked it on the trade show floor. Uh,
mhm.
Very surprised, very much blown away, and since the trade show have I was picking up handfuls of these all the time, and a box purchase as well in the middle of that, and yeah, and just love this. Explored the other vitola that it was offered in, and just ultimately came back to the Robusto format for this. So the number 9 cigar of the year, um, excuse me, is, let's see. I obviously have
Mhm.
it in front of me, just getting my notes down. So the number 9 cigar of 2024 is the McAuliffe Blue Robusto. Uh, Also Sumatran, San Andreas Sumatran wrapper.
San
That's a
Andreas, right?
interesting note there. The binder is Ecuadorian Habano. The filler is from Nicaragua and Dominican Republic. Uh, Both non-disclosed, so we don't know, like, is it Nicaraguan Esteli, Jalapa, etc. So like
Mhm.
I've got specific as possible on these descriptions, and so far like these were pretty nondescript, just region just provided. Obviously
Mhm.
manufactured in Nicaragua at Fabrica de McAuliffe, their new factory. And it's a traditional Robusto format, 5 by 50. I'm smoking it now, still just awesome. This was the example that I was giving earlier about where we smoked a different Vitola on a round table, and I like it. I like the Toro a lot, but the Robusto is for me is where it's at. I just absolutely think this cigar is incredible. Um, and McAuliffe continues to put out some really great cigars that are great for the budget. The cigar comes under
Mhm.
$10 for MSRP. The Black was another one that was fantastic, appeared on my list. And the original McAuliffe A also appeared on my list too. Love that cigar. Still smoke that today. Um, so they're putting together a nice additions to the portfolio for budget friendly, but it's pretty darn elegant in my opinion. Um, I really enjoyed this cigar. Still do.
Mhm.
I really get some nice baking spices out of it.
Mhm.
You mentioned gingerbread, which was interesting because I thought
Mhm.
that came out as well too. But anything of note that you really enjoyed about this cigar? You noted the construction and the appearance, as I mentioned when I started smoking it tonight. But any other standouts for you, George?
I liked that cigar because I thought that it was, and again, obviously, I wasn't thinking about trying to evaluate uh, but I think value is an important proposition when you're going through the reveal and looking at these things. I thought there was something about the that cigar that I felt it got me really close, but it didn't quite tip over the line. So I understood why it was number nine. And by the way, smoking these, I didn't have any idea when you gave them to me whether they were 1 through 10 in terms of how you ranked them. I never even thought about that. I assumed that that's the way they were identified to me. I loved that cigar's performance. It was, I know this is a corny thing to say, but it was a well-behaved cigar. It was a delight to smoke from start to finish. That was like the kind of thing that you can just sit there and find yourself enjoying. And I will say this, it's one of those cigars that has a tendency to be stuck to your fingers. Like you think, okay, I'm finished, and you go to put it down, and then you go, but let me just have one more puff,
Hmm.
right? And that is you have to look at what you're smoking when that's happening. When you sit there and you go, "Oh my God, man, I'm going to be burning my fingers in a minute, but I can't quite quit it." Right? It's that good. And when you add into that equation that it is a very more than fair value proposition, it deserves being celebrated, and more people should know about it. So I salute you for landing on that and identifying it.
Yeah, this was it's worth noting too that this was probably your favorite out of the pre-show smokes. You gave it
Mhm.
a 91. So some
Mhm.
really high praise from you.
It
The
is very high praise.
Yeah, I mean this is a cigar that will continue to be in my rotation. I mean, and
Yeah.
its representation on the list at number nine may seem pretty low considering how much I really enjoyed it, but I think it also goes to show too sometimes that where cigars necessarily place, you know, it is sometimes about availability and sometimes there's cigars that this is going to be an everyday player. Like I know when I reach for this cigar, um,
Mhm.
I'm 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 know what I'm getting. I know the experience I'm going to
Yeah.
have, and
When you take it out of the humidor, when you take it out of the humidor, you know exactly what you're anticipating, and you know that it's going to deliver.
yeah. And what's really
That's
great about the flavor palette too is it's in any kind of time of day smoke. Like I could smoke this in the
right.
morning. I
You
could
could
smoke
smoke it
it.
in the morning with coffee. You could
Yeah.
smoke it in the morning with coffee and absolutely love it. It's not
Yeah.
overpowering. It's not going to leave your mouth like the Russian army walked through in their sock feet. You know.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, that will bring up number eight.
Hey.
So number eight was speaking of morning cigars, is a little bit of a lighter blend. So this is actually this company's first appearance in my top 10, which is pretty shocking considering it's historically is a huge staple in humidors around the country and around the globe for that matter. But um and I know it's a brand that you're familiar with, but this is not the I guess Patriarch's brand, but it is owned by a specific company. So the number eight cigar of 2024 is the La Roma de Cuba, Connecticut
Connecticut.
Corona. Um, so here it is for everybody. So the La Roma de Cuba, Connecticut Corona. And what I mentioned about it is being owned by, it's owned by, La Roma de Cuba is owned and manufactured by Ashton. They work with two manufacturers. They work with Fuente for their namesake brands. And then for the two brands that they own, addition to that, El Aroma de Cuba and San Cristobal, they're
St.
manufactured at
Christopher.
the My Father Cigar Factory. So um, this is an Ecuadorian Connecticut shade wrapper. Binder is Nicaraguan. Uh, Filler is Nicaraguan as well. Um, and the country obviously manufactured in Nicaragua at the My Father Cigar Factory. It's a 5.5 by 44. And
Mhm.
again, another value priced hit too. But this was another cigar at the trade show where we sat down with Andy Green from Ashton, and I lit up. I was absolutely blown away. This cigar was probably at that particular trade show was the best cigar that I had smoked the entire trade show.
At that
And
point,
then yeah,
to
at
that
that
point.
point, and then it continued to perform afterwards, which was really good as well too. So um, I just think it's very clean, has some beautiful spice, that Nicaraguan tobacco in the filler, paired with that creamy the creamy wrapper, just really really balances well, but adds beautiful spice to it. Really, just for me, just a really sensational combination that really kind of just puts together a really nice blend. There, it can, I have had experiences where some are a little bit tighter than the others. I don't like super tight draws, but the flavor still of the blend really kind of sang through some of those experiences. Um, which sounds like that might have been your experience, George, but yours might have been a little bit of a tighter experience. So what else did you kind of did you get out of this Corona?
Well, so let's two things. One, when I took the cigars out of the rest humidor and laid them out, that was the cigar that I chose to smoke first. So that was the first cigar that I'd had since the December 22nd. Long gap without smoking, and it delivered everything that I wanted in a cigar. And I also agree that it was very clean, but it was a traditional smoke. It didn't have quite the creaminess that I was anticipating, but I loved the balance of the cigar, and I loved the overall effect of it. I was like, I took my time with that cigar because it was, like I said, it was the first thing that I'd smoked in 10 days. And I was like, wow, this cigar is really it's given me everything that I want without being a punch in the chest. And I was really I was impressed with the style, and it too in a way is it's a little bit of a departure, right? So in other words, the my father's stuff has a tendency to shade towards the bigger, the bolder, the richer, the deeper, and when you take that Connecticut and put it on the top, you get you get the blonde influence in that
Mhm.
in the direction of the flavor, and it's really a surprise. I thought it was a very successful blend. It was very balanced, and it was to me like the perfect entree into this. Um, but I didn't go gaga over it. I want to tell you that I rated that one either 87, 88, or 88, 89. I don't have my notes right here, but it was in that range, which is like super solid performer, and very enjoyable. But it didn't lift me into the stratosphere. But I enjoyed every bit of it, and I gave it what I thought was a fair treatment and relatively high praise for where it fit. And I think that Pepin and Jaime are doing incredible things, and they are continuing to deliver both in their own portfolio and in the things that they do for Robbie at Ashton. Uh, Beautiful work. Cigars that are not simply retreads of something else that they do. In other words, when they present a new La Aroma or a new San Cristobal for the Ashton portfolio, they are original takes. They're not
Mhm.
just a left turn from something that they're doing in their own home base. And I admire that. I think it's tremendous.
Did you were you familiar with how that relationship started? I know that you know the Levine family have gone, go back with them and everything.
Mhm.
Were you familiar how that relationship started? I mean, was there a particular reason why Ashton chose to partner with a different factory outside of Fuente for these other projects? Or
Yeah, don't forget that at the time that they did that, so that's probably I want to say it was mid-aughts that the first generation of La Roma de Cuba came out, and they were not manufactured by Pepin. Um, and he had a cigar which was made by, I was wrong. Anyway, but they approached sourcing cigars in Nicaragua because they knew there were constraints on what they could get from the Fuentes in the Ashton portfolio. In the Ashton portfolio, don't forget at that time they were still doing Maduro. You had the cabinets, you had the Ashton Classics, and you had both VSG and ESG having just appeared. So Carlito was doing incredible things for them, but the demand was far outstripping the supply at that point. That's one of the reasons why they brought in La Roma de Cuba. But I remember because the original La Roma was a fine cigar. There was nothing wrong with it, but
Yeah.
it would never be in this range. But when Pepin made a La Roma de Cuba cabinet selection for them, I remember I had the store in Garden City. I was like, oh my God, these are fantastic. And I sold the hell out of those cigars. They were delightful. They were very original Nicaraguan cigars, right? In other words, they were a new path in terms of the balance and what people were looking for from Nika cigars at that point. And that just opened the floodgates. Once they saw what they were doing, then it became really obvious that the both and then San Cristobal came out, but the La Aroma portfolio should be in Pepin's hands.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because why the original blend is still around. Because I think, at least from my perspective, and again, I know it's subjective, the Mi Amor is still a cigar that I go back to. If Robbie decided to release a new Vitola in that, it would probably, I mean, not Stone Cold Lead Pipe Block, but it'd probably be pretty damn close to being lead, you know, eh, lead pipe block in my top 10. Just
A cinch
because
for getting there.
I love that blend.
Mhm.
And the Miamore Reserve is also outstanding, unbelievable. And now the Connecticut is just a rock star too. And to your point, the original release of it is just like there's no other way to say it. It's just average. And
Mhm.
um and obviously there's people out there that enjoy it. They wouldn't keep it around if it wasn't. But man, I was really, really, really impressed with this. And
Mhm.
it shouldn't have been no surprise. I mean, Ashton's a company that understands lighter bodied smokes. The Ashton White Label is a classic and a humidor staple, and has been delighting fans of the lighter body smoke for decades now. So it's it should become as
It's
no
an
surprise, but it was
anchor.
blips.
Exactly. But so in a way, I think the point to the La Roma, Connecticut is that it is as welcoming and as much of a hug to the consumers as the classic Ashton is. It is a cigar that has really broad appeal, and you can be a real cigar snob and appreciate it, and you can be a guy that's smoking his first cigar after having been given one at a wedding or something,
For
right? In
sure.
other words, it's that generous in its appeal.
Well, I certainly enjoyed the number nine cigar again tonight, and I'm really glad that we're on the same page with it. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it so much. But you lit up the number three cigar, which we haven't revealed yet. But what are your thoughts so far?
Mhm. I am well. Look where we are. I haven't put this cigar down yet. It's got this beautiful, shiny, lovely blonde wrapper. It's just a delight. It's interesting. It has this easy draw that in some ways reminds me of what the great old school Partagas D4s were. In the old days, when you open up a box of Partagas D4, you didn't really know which market they were coming from that would affect what you were going to see when you opened the box. Sometimes you'd have this beautiful blonde wrapper which had this floral, creamy quality, and other times you'd get this dark, oily wrapper, and it would be a totally different personality. This reminds me in style and execution of that kind of floral, just it's like a walk through the garden, a flower shop, just beautiful, without being mild, boring, bland, or that the thing that has a tendency to happen in cigars when they live in this range is that when you get down here, they start to get this sour quality, right? In other words, look where I am in this, and evaluate. There's a honeyed quality to this, which is absolutely beautiful.
Wonderful. All right. Well, let's.
So let's just say we'll come back to what it is later on as we get through this. But this cigar has earned its place for me based on the flavors that are here. What's going to be interesting is I'm already thinking now about what I'm going to go to out of the next things that are in the stack. But I don't want to put the cigar down. I don't want to stop. It's a delight.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we'll learn more about that here in just a little bit. Let's talk about kick off one of our topics. Now, you mentioned tis the season. It is the cigar list season. It's one of my favorite. It's certainly my favorite times of year. I love the criticisms and the praises, and I love seeing my friends in cigar manufacturing get recognized for all their hard work by people and fellow media outlets. I love putting together my lists. I love following other folks like the consensus from Halfwheel, the top 30 from Cigar Coop. Developing palates is top 25 is one of my favorites as well too.
Speaking of harsh judges,
yeah, I was gonna say, and of course the originator. And we've talked about your history with us, obviously, in previous shows, George. But the Cigar Aficionado top 25 is always the list that, as Coop says, nobody cares about, but everyone can't stop talking about. So, thought we would talk about it a little bit tonight. So they announced it. My father gets another #1 cigar of the year. This is their third time winning it. The Libigen 1922 box press torpedo, the Flor de los Antilles, and now the Judge is earned their third #1 spot. So kind of want to go into a little bit back into the history of the list, George, because you were around with the first iterations of it. Do you think it's changed much, the list itself, the process since you've left, or do you think it's changed? Do you think it's changed at all?
I don't. So for the most part, the editorial team that is working to produce this is not that much changed from my time there. I was agitating for us to do a top list well before I actually left the company. But the actual emergence of the list is to be factually is post my time there. But I was intimately involved in the process, the evaluations, and then also a big supporter and defender when it became clear that when they first started publishing the list, the immediate reactions were that it was more political than it was. So I think it's important to say that, just as you were emphasizing that the cigars that make up your top 10 are things that you have repeated experience with, that you've bought, that you've really got your hands in the dirt with them. You have smoked these cigars on many occasions, and obviously in different circumstances too. So you know them, and you're 1,000% confident in how they feel. The cigar aficionado judges arrive at that same kind of conclusion by a different manner. In other words, the process begins by taking all the cigars that were 90 and above in the past year's ratings and collecting them and smoking them and getting that down to 75. And then you're doing the same thing. The editors are getting a fresh batch, again, numbered and not the same. And they smoke to get down to 50, and then they get down to 25. Where I believe, and there's no other way to say this part. I think the only place where politics, that is, the relationships that they may or may not allow to shape their thinking, comes when it's down to the ranking of like the top three cigars, right?
Okay.
And it's not about it's never about advertising revenue. It's about the depth of the relationship and their understanding of what's there. And so I always say, listen, it's obvious, some years it's like I look and I go, okay, we're now at the point in the cycle where um, they're going to be looking at a Cuban cigar as the number one cigar of the
Right.
year, which means for everybody else in the marketplace, the number two cigar is in effect the number one cigar of the year. But and it's relatively easy to pick out when those things happen because you can see, okay, for better or for worse, Cuba goes through cycles. It has to do with tobacco, but it also has to do very much with politics in their case, about releasing a series of cigars that are actually great. To this point, where we are in the marketplace today, it's sort of ludicrous to be thinking about anything that's top 10 worthy from Cuba, labeling it as being available to the general consumer, is not relevant because, first of all, obviously in this market, a small fraction of people will have experienced them for reasons of availability, but also because the whole distribution system has been reshuffled, and who gets attention and who gets special treatment and where these cigars end up. The things that are worthy of saluting as great cigars from Cuba are much harder to get your hands on today, much less reliable in terms of, like, oh, I'm going into the cigar store at the Georges Stank in Paris, or I'm going into the Davidoff store in Geneva, or I'm going into a Casa del Habano in Madrid, or in Dubai, or in Hong Kong, and whether or not you're going to find the cigars that everybody's raving about, the chances are, unless you're a pretty loyal customer of uh, a very high-ranking cigar store from the Middle East to the East, it's unlikely that you're going to find the trophy cigars,
Right.
except by sheerest coincidence. So for that reason, I think about how Cuban cigars fit into the list in a way that's like, okay, I don't really care. And this year, I thought that they were capably, there were what? There were two Habanos in the
Three.
top 10, and
Oh, yes. Yes. Two
no,
in the
no,
top three.
there were three in the top 25, but one
And
of
two
them
in top.
fell outside the top 10,
Yeah, so
right?
you had the
So
Partagas Linnea Maestro, which was the number four
yes.
cigar of the year, and the Cohiba
Mhm.
Maduro 5 Magicos, which is I predicted would be a top 10 cigar for them. Well, appeared
Yeah,
at number 8. So
and I'm not wild about that cigar, but that's probably personal bias as much as anything else. But to my way of thinking, and this probably has more to do with what I like and what I value in a classic Cuban cigar experience. I would have swapped the number 8 and the number, what is it, 15 or 16, something like that, the Romeo that was in there, because I think that's a beautiful cigar
the
that
White
is
Churchill.
actually more
Oh yeah,
widely available. Yeah, that's a
and
beautiful. That cigar is a great success.
yeah, I've smoked a ton of those in my life, and I I'm not a Cuban cigar fan over a lot of what they call New World cigars, particularly, but I thought the White
Mhm.
Churchill is one of those cigars when that appears on the list. Um, it
You
doesn't
think it
it
earned its
doesn't
spot?
yeah it
It
doesn't
doesn't bother.
yeah it doesn't get a snow. It's not like I don't look at it sideways for sure.
No, no, not at all. Agreed.
I thought there was
But
with
but let me just. I want to go back to one thing that I was saying. I think that like the one, two, and three cigars are the kind of thing that can be so close in terms of their scoring after all of those repeated smokes. not just what happened during the year when they were being evaluated, but when they were being chopped down from 100 plus to 75 to 50 to 25. By the time you get to the cigars that constitute the top five, the shading in terms of points is so close that I I just think it's entirely possible that there's a little bit of politics in, well, we gave this cigar number one last year or 2 years ago, so we're going to make it number two this year.
Hmm.
And this cigar, which is a new entry in this territory, is going to fit there. I mean, if you think about it, the top 10, you and Coop probably have discussed this before. You say, all right, there's going to be a Padron, there's going to be a Fuente, there's going to
Hmm.
be there's probably going to be a My
Oli
Father,
Oliva, my
certainly going to be
father.
an Oliva, right? So you've got 4 or 5 spots somewhere in the top 10 that are already done, and then think about the fact that there's probably going to be a Cuban cigar in there. So that's at the very least, that's five. That's half of the top 10.
Right.
So what I'm always excited about, and by the way, also, as long as we're there and we're talking about what's happened in the past, you got to put Ernesto in there. So now that's
Hmm.
six,
Right.
right? In other words, My
And then
Father,
Rocky's been a top
Fuente,
10 player.
or
Yeah.
Rockies, yeah.
Seven.
He,
So
he's
it's
Rockies,
three. Yeah, you got three to play
right?
with.
So the cigars that are going to be that are going to pop up in that list that are not out of the predictable lineup are the ones that I really look forward to seeing who bust through, who achieved, who overachieved in that sense. Because in order to make it into the top 10, you have got to have delivered a phenomenal cigar that smokes reliably, excellent, excellent plus repeatedly. And it has to be available. Don't forget, listen, people don't think about this. They buy those cigars. Just like, you're talking about how,
Hmm.
you're acknowledging if you got some cigars from the trade show or something like that, but these cigars are cigars that you're buying.
Yeah.
They are too, and they're buying for a bigger group of people over a longer period of time. And because they have to revisit these things, they're not from the same batch. In other words, it's not like they bought a box and they're sitting there and they're going back to the same thing. These are multiple acquisitions, and that deserves defending because if a maker is meeting those conditions, in other words, if they're achieving that excellence and delivering reliably, like you can't go wrong with a Padron, you can't go wrong with a Fuente, you can't go wrong with an EPC. There are
Hmm.
plenty of other things that have made appearances in this list where, okay, things have been different. In other words, the experience that the consumer found by the time they got to the cigar store and bought the cigar that was in the top 10 or the top five, that was the thing that they listened to the rating and said, oh, I got to get one of those. And then they went in the store and they go, eh. It's because the manufacturer has experienced an onslaught of requests for those, and the product that is being shipped into cigar stores is nowhere near the same age. In other words, the provenance is completely different for that
Right.
cigar by the time many consumers get their hands on them in February or March or April, whatever it may be. And that deserves, people need to acknowledge that. I tell people all the time, man, if you go rushing into the store to try and buy cigars out of the top 10 list, you should take them home and put them in your humidor and don't smoke them.
Yeah.
Smoke the cigars that you bought last year at the top.
Very, very infamously, that was the letdown for Alec Bradley with Prensado was that, I mean, he fell on, Alan Rubin fell on the sword with that,
He
yeah,
almost destroyed his business, but he clawed his way back.
yeah. And that was, I mean, to me, it's still one of the best stories, to ever appear, out of these lists. Now, before we kind of moved on and kind of jump into seven, eight, excuse me, six,
Seven,
7, 6, and 5, excuse me, 7,
five,
6, and
yes.
5. Um, do you want to talk about something you mentioned earlier? So you said that again, 'tis the season that you
Yeah.
not to I don't want to put words in your mouth, George, but you said that you don't really hold too much stock in a lot of these lists, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to expand on that a little bit.
I I question the judgment of many people who publish these lists because I, through the years, have looked at their process. And I also look at the variability of the people that they allow to provide input about, what ranks, what's the cigar they want to rave about. And so with now this proliferation, in other words, it used to be that there are three or four that you could look at, but cigar media has become so expansive. There are so many people involved in this. And some of, listen, look, they're supposed to be personal. They're supposed to reflect someone's level of experience and their embrace of the process. So it's all forgivable in the sense that, okay, it's just one person's opinion, or in some instances, a collaborative, with a panel or a group, some people that you're revisiting. But there are a handful of them that I'm discouraged to see getting weighted in a way that I think, why? What have these people shown you that earns your trust? Right. So in that sense, I think the cigar aficionado, again, by the fact that it is largely the same group of people, and there's a certain degree of rigor in the way that they approach the tasting process, and the tasting coordinator has a tremendous amount of work to do to synthesize comments from multiple editors and produce a cohesive um, framework for evaluating the cigar and talking to people about how it met those conditions. I don't think you get as much of that from many of the other people that are out there. Instead, what you have is emotional reactions, which are about, I loved this cigar and I had a great experience when I first got it, and I got to know the factory and the people there in a way, and it closes the gap. In other words, it's a different level of experience about that than the average consumer has. And you don't get the sense of that. You don't know that by watching their podcast or reading their blog or picking up a publication. And I think that's a little bit misleading. I think that we have amongst ourselves a select group of people that we respect, peers in this business, who take their work in this field seriously, and who do their best to bring not only their keen palates, but their ability to articulate what it is about the product that deserves the consumer's attention. And I also think that there are some people who are nakedly biased about certain things, who are honest about saying that, like, I
Hmm.
don't like this, or I haven't enjoyed this in the past. So, and that is of value, though all of that information is useful, but you need to be pretty closely involved with any given entity, any cigar media outlet that is publishing something like this. Um, you need to have been familiar with before you leap wholeheartedly into their end of the year list. There are people in the media world that are interested in how they put forward their top 10 or their top 20 list, based on the business that they expect to do with them in the coming year. And those are not people that are actually seriously embracing the role of being, to use a hated and obnoxious phrase, but legitimately cigar influencers. In other words, people that move the needle in the market, that make consumers sit up and go, oh, I never thought about that cigar. I better go out and find one, right? So, and again, the more mercenary people are about that, the less likely the consumer is to have a rewarding experience that they're going to go, oh my God, how did I overlook this cigar? And I'm so glad I found it, and I'm so glad it was in the ratings. That, I think, is a more unusual experience because there are people that don't discriminate that much about what they get. We've all seen people walk in to a cigar store with their phone in their hand and say, "Do you have this cigar?" And they don't. There's no. They're not going to a tobacconist to advise them about, okay, this is your flavor, this is your palate, this is what you like. They're just, I got to have the cigar that has this band that everybody's talking about, and that's what they
Right.
want in their humidor, so they can hand it out to their buddies at a party or something like that. That's bullshit. I don't, look, God bless, it's great. More people should walk into cigar stores and say, I want to buy something based on what they read or what they saw, but I don't. I'm not so concerned about the what that process is. So I'll get down off my soapbox, but you get my what I'm saying is, to my way of thinking, there's an elite group of people that attention should be paid. Their opinion should be respected, and what they announce as the blue ribbon prize winners in their years worth of evaluating deserves consideration and respectful consideration, as opposed to, oh, I wonder who got to them.
Yeah. I think that it's I think it's great that and I'm a big freedom of speech purveyor, so like and subscriber to that, you know, part part of our American culture and everything. I think it's one of our greatest rights, and particularly in the cigar industry, I think it's really great that the people can put out their opinions and for the most part. But there's like one thing that one part of my criteria that I knew I was going to have in there was I didn't want because I do smoke a lot of cigars from, as I mentioned before, I've mentioned James Brown, I've mentioned Hector Alfonso with Espinosa. Those are
Yeah,
cigar, those blenders, I've said on many occasions, they very rarely make a cigar that does not hit my palate. And so I
yeah.
smoke a lot of those cigars, and there's a lot of other companies too, but I've mentioned those guys kind of frequently. And when that comes around, I didn't want my cigar list, my top 10 list to have multiple from a same company because I thought, I decided on a top 10 list versus a traditional, what has become traditional, a top 25. And with
25.
that, I wanted to limit the scope and broaden the horizon of it because I do smoke a lot of stuff. I do smoke,
Widely. You
yeah,
smoke widely, right?
yeah,
That's the point.
absolutely. Vitolas, blends, manufacturers, and I wanted,
Manufacturers.
yeah, and I wanted the list to represent the confetti, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
to my cigar smoking experience throughout the years. So that's kind of why I went around with this. So, well, without further ado, let's get into the number seven cigar of the year, which
Okay, but
was,
before we
yeah,
do, I was going to tell you that I'm going to light up my second cigar, and I thought that I would pick the number five.
okay,
I'm going to stay with that Robusto. Is that okay with you? Does
yeah,
that make
absolutely,
sense?
absolutely.
In other words, you know where I am now.
Yeah, I burned down number nine. I burned down number Calif Blue Robusto, and I actually lit up number five as well. So we're actually smoking the same thing.
Okay, cool,
Um,
good. So go ahead. Let's
but let's
interface.
Yeah, so let's go with number seven here. So without further ado, my number seven cigar of the year is the Postania Connecticut Bellicoso. I've got it right here. It's a Ecuadorian Connecticut shade wrapper. The binder is Pennsylvania broadleaf. The filler is Nicaraguan. It's manufactured in Nicaragua at the Fabrica de Tabacos Nico Sueño. Most famously, for people who might be following factories, that's where Roma Craft is manufactured.
Mhm.
Blended by Mike Stevankevich and Skip Martin. Um, and this was a blend that I was just a super fan of from the very beginning. I was really excited when it was released, particularly because I knew I was a big fan of the Intemperancy C that came out of Nico Sueños, and I thought that Mike's interpretation with Connecticut would be interesting, and it certainly was. I really enjoyed um, the Vitolas that came out. The Bellicoso, surprisingly, because again, I'm not a big Torpedo Bellicoso Figurado fan, was the one that
Mhm.
really jumped out to me initially with the original releases of vitolas, and that was the one that I smoked the most of. Now, there's been a new vitola that was released recently that we actually just smoked last week in honor of my son's birth, the Justice,
Mhm.
which is a Corona,
Yeah.
which I really, really dig. Um, but that was more of a recent release. This is from the original batch of vitolas, and the Bellicoso is just a fantastic, fantastic cigar. I really, really, really enjoyed it. And it's got the things that you like about Nicaraguan tobacco. It's got the spiciness. The broadleaf really kind of lends an interesting component to it. Um, the um, the the broadleaf, excuse me, the Connecticut shade isn't very,
Connecticut.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not very creamy. And I think that has to do with the binder kind of giving it a little bit more edge to it. It smokes pretty fast. So um, if you're looking for a Bellicoso with a more open draw, I think this is going to be your bag. And it's something that I certainly enjoyed from it. Some really nice, pepper. And I thought it was a really, really well balanced blend. And there's some floral components to it as well that I find really interesting. Floral, citrus. Those are cigar notes that I really kind of dig. It was evident
Mhm.
from my pick last year with George Rico's
Mhm.
number one winner. He blends with tobaccos that kind of give that offering to a blend.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything interesting enough. There wasn't any like Peruvian or Colombian or those stereotypical
There were no
tobaccos.
there were no trick tobaccos in it.
Yeah, they kind of lend to that. That still kind of gave this natural citrus, floral component and notes to it. But I really enjoyed it, and it's my number seven cigar of the year, the Pastania Connecticut Bellicoso. George, what were your thoughts on this particular cigar? Because this is one of the ones that you smoked as well prior to the show.
Yeah, and I liked it, and I loved the way it started out. I liked the appearance. I was actually excited to smoke the cigar. I think that there's a component that has to do with youth in it. For me, the cigar broke down as I got deeper into it, and it didn't follow the arc that I expected, and it didn't deliver the same richness that I was anticipating it would build into. But I loved the personality of the cigar as it opened up, as it started out, and I thought to myself. Um, I actually would have been happy if I'd smoked that cigar halfway through and put it down and stopped.
Let's talk about that for a second, George. Like, there we talk about you. You were talking about your experience with the number three cigar where you were smoking it down. I certainly burned through the McAuliffe Blue as well in a similar fashion.
Yeah,
Really enjoyed it to the very end. But there are cigars that we can enjoy, not necessarily where we're burning our fingertips. You mentioned that
right.
you'd be happy putting this cigar down halfway. Um,
Mhm.
that's not necessarily a knock, though. Um,
It's not a knock. It's not a knock. It's a but it is the kind of thing that you need to be aware of so that you don't. So, for instance, when a cigar does go, when it gets a sour note or a bitter note, something happens in it. It has a tendency to taint everything that happened before. So if you're watching what a cigar is doing and it's giving you, you're halfway through it and you've really enjoyed it, and it starts to go in that direction. I'm not a guy that says I got to get my value out of this. I have to smoke the whole cigar. I will stop smoking a cigar because I'll go, okay, I think I got the best of what they intended. I think I got where what they're trying to do with the blend, and I'm happy that I smoked this much of it, but I don't need any more.
And so this is Mike's first appearance in my top 10. He has had an honorable mention with his SBC 2022 last year.
Mhm.
So really excited to see Mike pop up on the list. And he did a dynamite
Mhm.
job with this blend.
Mhm.
So really excited
Mhm.
about that. So that was number seven. The number six cigar of the year is another storied family inside the cigar industry. And so we've got number 6 coming in for us as well. So let me go ahead and pull that up. And we've got the let's go. Come on, Bear.
Mhm.
Need to make my notes a little bit bigger next time. I have the Plasencia Concessia 149 Azpualpa.
149.
It's a Honduran wrapper with a Honduran binder and a Honduran filler as well too. And this was a cigar that I really particularly enjoyed. Interestingly enough, the 151 was a lot more quote unquote Honduran. The Cosecha 151 was a lot more Honduran than this particular cigar. It's manufactured obviously in Honduras at the Tabacos de Oriente, which is the Plasencia factory. It's a 6x52 soft pressed Toro. And for me, I thought this blend was absolutely fantastic. I've liked a lot of the Cosecha blends. I did since I mentioned the 151. The 151 will probably never make an appearance on my top 10 list. I was not the biggest fan of that one, but um, the Alma de Fuerte, the Alma de Fuego, the Alma de Campo, uh, all the other concessions, with the exception of the 151, including this 149, have been absolute bangers for me. Really, really have enjoyed the cigar, and was pleased that it placed on this year's list. This is my number 6 cigar of the year. Really enjoyed it. You also had the opportunity to smoke it as well, George. And you had some really interesting thoughts on it as well. I think the one things that stopped that kind of again, the appearance really stood out to you. But you've got
Mhm.
a lot. It was a lot of there's a lot of complexity to this blend, despite its very linear tobacco makeup. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think I actually I told you of the top five, it was by far my favorite of the 6 through 10. In other words,
Hmm.
the second half of the top 10. I was like that cigar just opened up. I in buying it and smoking it in the past and everything else. I've been a big fan of 149. I too am not anywhere near. Let's call a spade a spade. I was disappointed by 151. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's my
Or our
particular
collective
palate.
palettes, right? Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah.
it's appeared on some lists. The
Oh
151
yeah. No
appeared on some
question.
lists in this year.
No,
So
and God bless him for earning that. But the 149 to me was a classic cigar. It had flavors that I think have been missing from the marketplace for a long time, and I loved that they were back in it, and that cigar was there, and that by virtue of how powerful the Placencia distribution pipeline is, a lot of people would have a chance to smoke it. I think they're just great cigars. I celebrate where they are in this position, and um, I might have put that cigar higher in this top 10. I mean, we'll see as we go through. But I was just I thought it was refreshing. It was original flavors, but classic in a way that it was a callback to taste that I haven't had for a while. I love the cigar.
yeah, I really enjoyed you had some notes about the retrohale that I'll quote here in a second. I too think the retrohale of this particular one of the Cosechas for Placencia is by far it's all star. And I
Yeah.
think even in my top 10 this year, I think it has one of the more complex and deeper retrohales. Now you had some interesting notes for its retrohale. The one word that stood out to me in your notes was it was soft, gentle, complex, but you used a term that I, you know, it's a little foreign to me so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on what you meant by it. You used the adjective powdery.
Yeah.
When you use that word, specific to the retrohale, what does that mean to you? If you could expand on
It
it.
it means that it's soft and um, long lasting, but in the most delicate possible way. So when I say powdery, what I mean is it's almost talc like. It's so gentle. Listen, you know, there are so many cigars that are out there that we like, that we enjoy, and that we smoke. And the retro is very, very powerful. When you do the retro, all of a sudden you go, "Oh my God, there's that tobacco. There's something about the retro that hits you and goes, this is an aspect of the blend that I wasn't present to before, and it can be many times when you notice it that way, it's because it's overtly peppery or just spice laden. In other words, that you sit there and go, wow. It wakes you up to a completely different dimension to the flavor of the tobacco. But when I say powdery, what I mean is that the retro is so gentle. It's like this caress. It's velvety. It's this, you just can't get enough of it. In other words, when you do that, you go, oh my God, that's like, it's finesse, it's age, it's balance. Everything is put together in a way that makes you sit there and go, holy, I can't wait to have that experience again. And it doesn't go away. In other words, when you've achieved that with your blend, with the finished cigar, and you're sitting there and smoking it, and you're getting that powdery retro, and you go, oh man, I want another puff like that. It delivers. It doesn't break down. It doesn't go away. It doesn't fall apart. Instead, it continues to make love to your palate.
So we got a couple of people who may have missed the vitola on this one. So plus this Placencia 149 Cosecha Azcualpa, I might be mispronouncing that, but Azcualpa is the number 6 cigar of 2024. So it's for all intents and purposes, it's a soft press Toro. It's a 6x52
Yeah,
format.
this is right.
And tremendous cigar. We're going to do a recap of what we've got so far, but let's go ahead and pull up our number 5, which you and I are smoking right now. So we'll get some of your
Mhm.
thoughts. I know you're nowhere near finished with it, but this was a cigar again that I was very much impressed with from its very beginnings. Now, interestingly, I think it's going to be a little bit controversial because a lot of people I know who liked this cigar in the very beginning, for them it trailed off as they kind of smoked through it and everything. I've continued to smoke and continue to enjoy it. I think it has changed a little bit from its initial onset, not necessarily for the worse, not necessarily for the better, but I think it has changed a little bit. But I've still really, really enjoyed this blend. So the number 5 cigar of 2024 is the Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust Umbagog Bronzeback. This is a playoff of the Umbagog line, but it's only
Yeah,
listed it's released in a single vitola. We'll call it a Robusto
yeah,
or a Corona Extra. It's a 5 by 48. Uh,
yeah,
and it's what we're smoking right now. Um, it's a Connecticut 2LS Connecticut broadleaf wrapper. The binder is Nicaraguan. The filler is Nicaraguan. It's manufactured in Nicaragua, and it's manufactured at the Nicaragua American Cigars SA, affectionately known as Noxa factory.
yeah.
So Steve Saka has used his factory in conjunction with Hoyt Nicaragua to manufacture his cigars since the beginning of his company. Umbagog was kind of the answer and was the, as he likes to put it, the less sexier broadleaf offering compared to his Mi Querida line
Mhm.
originally. And I thought the original Umbagogs were really great. This one to me just had a lot of extra panache to it. I thought it was much more elegant. I thought it offered a little bit more complexity. It was still earthy and hearty and gritty, like its Umbagog counterparts. But to me, it
The
just
only the
had a little
only
bit
thing I
more
would
finesse.
disagree with is gritty. I don't get gritty out of it at all. But I do get the earthiness. But the beauty of the earthiness is that it is counterbalanced by the sweetness that the wrapper is delivering. I think this is a marvelous cigar because it's walking this tightrope between something that is much less sophisticated and um, much more simple. And yet, this cigar takes that and goes, well, wait a minute, what about this? And it gives you a twist in terms of the flavors. In other words, I think when you light the cigar up, you go, oh, I know this flavor, I know
Mhm.
this experience. But as you smoke the cigar, it continues to reveal different things. Like, so for instance, as you can see, I'm really just past hitting cruising speed, but it is already, as I'm, like maybe halfway through the first third, it's already turning. There's already new flavors emerging from this. And I got to say, man, I think this cigar is just a little magic trick because it's a bunch of different things. And it continues to reveal itself to you as you proceed. And also, I think these cigars are a tremendous value.
Yes. So that was something I kind of noticed too. The Placencia and Ferio Tego being exceptions to this, but three cigars so far in the top 10, number five, number eight, number nine are really value-based hits. We're talking about
Yeah,
cigars that are sub $10 or
yeah,
$10 right on the money. And
$10.
yes, they are smaller vitolas, but they really do pack a punch. Um, I think what again, we are talking about the uniqueness of the aroma of the Placencia a moment ago. The uniqueness of the aroma bronze back on the bronze back to me is it's it's very linear. It's this beautiful earthiness that kind of goes through the
Mhm.
nostrils, but there's this really kind of hit of espresso right at the end for me that just kind of sits right on the end of the palate at the end of on the end of the retro for me too, that I really enjoy. And
It
it's
tickles your
just really good.
sinuses.
Yeah,
It tickles
absolutely.
them, right? It's got this little, it's like dancing there, right on the edge, and it's flirting with being stronger than it is.
Absolutely. I think
This
that
is
that
this
was one
is
of the
the
things
kind
that
of cigar
changed.
that
Go ahead,
this is
please.
the kind of cigar you could have as a nightcap cigar
Hmm.
because it's not this overpowering smoke, but it's got enough personality and enough flavor and enough things going on that you can't stop smoking it because you're like, what's going to happen next? So even if this was a cigar that I put down, a little past the halfway point, which I'm not planning on doing, obviously. I would be happy with this cigar. I think it's deceptively complex because it
Hmm.
doesn't present that way when it starts. But what it does as you smoke it is fascinating.
Absolutely. Really, really enjoyed this cigar. So congratulations to Steve, putting together
Mhm.
another winner, in the Umbagong Bronze Back, number five of my top 10 cigars for 2024. So we're going to come back and do four, three, and two here in just a few moments, but wanted
Yeah,
to get into a couple of our fun segments in our next topic. Um, of course, our this is the time of the evening where we always do our United Cigar Presidential Trivia segment, which is always brought to you by United Cigars. Um, you know, Makers of La Giana Havana and distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, the highly acclaimed Atabey, Byron, Firecracker, and now excuse me, La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, and the Firecracker, and of course the highly acclaimed Atabey, Byron, and now Alfonso lines from Selected
Alfonso.
Tobacco.
Yeah.
Smoke one today and start living united. So I've started to do more true or false questions in this segment. I think it's a lot more fun. But I really wanted to get a little crazy tonight, and so I thought this was
Mhm.
fun. This topic has come up quite a bit with me. My mom has been visiting from El Paso for the past couple weeks for Christmas and the New Year and stuff, and I don't think she ever quite realized what kind of how superstitious her son was. And I was like, well, Dad was superstitious too. And so superstitions have been kind of creeping up, and my aversion to the number six. So my apologies to Placencia for being the number six cigar of the year. It's not a knock to you guys. It's just how the numbers fell. If I could do a top 10 list without the number six, I would gladly do it. But I'm not that crazy. But so uh, so here's the question of the presidential trivia segment. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was quite superstitious as well. And but was his aversion to the did he have an aversion to the number 13? True or false?
False.
It actually is true. Number 13 was his unlucky number. He hated it. And I would probably rival my hatred of number 6 to his of number 13. So he they he didn't quite come out and say it, but his suffering from
Triskaidekaphobia.
yeah, triskaidekaphobia, they kind of align that with him, saying that that was probably why. But he refused to travel on the 13th of the month.
Mhm.
So much so that if they really absolutely positively had to leave on the 13th, he would leave just a couple of minutes earlier. He would leave on, 11:50 on the
Right.
12th, or very early on the 14th. He hated it that much. But it was one of those things that was one of the things that he just absolutely hated. He was known to invite secretaries or other administrators in the White House to dinners that he was hosting. If the guest list stopped at 13, he would bring somebody in so that he would have 14 guests. So, hated the number 13, hated it with a passion. And but here's
Eleanor probably laughed at him for that.
Oh, probably. Now here's my favorite, right? Do you remember what day he died?
No, was it? It wasn't November 13th.
No, it was April 12th.
Well, oh, there you
So
go.
he
So,
died.
so
He
he
probably
broke. He
he
broke,
pro
so he wouldn't die on
yeah,
the 13th.
probably saw the 13th coming on the calendar. He's like, nope, I'm done. I'm out. Peace.
Nope, I'm
See ya.
done. Yeah.
Uh, but what's even freakier still that the next day, April 13th, was actually Friday the 13th. So he wasn't touching
Hmm.
that with the 10-foot pole if he could help it. So yeah, he actually passed away on April 12th, 1945, avoiding his dreaded 13th.
13.
So um there's my next question too. With obviously the election that just passed and everything, there's always a lot of chatter about running mates and everything when it comes to presidential elections. So Ronald Reagan was actually an actor, obviously, that turned president, but Clint Eastwood was 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 he almost the vice president? True or false? Clint Eastwood, actor Clint Eastwood, was he almost the vice president? True or false?
You mean for Reagan,
No, just in general.
or was he ever considered?
Was he ever considered for the vice presidency? True or false?
The question would be whether Trump considered making Clint Eastwood his running mate,
Yeah,
especially after.
at 90 something years old too. Of all the
Yeah,
old jokes he lobbied at Biden too. That would have been funny.
exactly, exactly. I would have to say false.
This is actually also true. George Herbert Walker Bush, the first Bush, was actually trailing Michael Dukakis in the 1988 presidential election, and he seriously considered Eastwood, who was then at the time he was actually the mayor of Carmel by the Sea,
Carmel
California.
by the Sea, exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't. I Clint never expressed the desire to be in politics at that level because he was never interested in all of the compromises that you have to make in order to be in a position for something like that. That's why I said false, because it was totally outside of um, his demeanor. I mean, he was even frustrated by the protocol and stuff that he had to do as the mayor of Carmel by the Sea, which was famously, lax when he took it over.
Yeah, I mean, at the time in the polls, there was Dukakis had an 18-point lead over Bush in 1988. And so
And you
this,
remember you remember why he tumbled in the polls?
um, it's escaping me at the moment. I know it was something very obvious, but go ahead and elaborate.
He stuck his head out of that tank wearing that
That's
stupid helmet.
that's right. Yes. Yeah, it's interesting in history, like the things that kind of get people out of um people get out of the running for stuff, or and how people take the lead in polls and stuff like that. That's why primary season is so fun because you see
Well,
people just come out of nowhere or drop out of nowhere, you
yeah.
know. Um, and but yeah, they were had an 18-point deficit, so they someone threw around, according to James Baker, former Secretary of State, and who was actually a campaign chairman at the time in 1988, talked about this in an interview, and he says we were pretty down, and we thought that the popularity of the actor would give a really good boost, but they ended up going obviously with Dan Quayle, and
A dual Hollywood ticket probably wouldn't have been a good idea.
yeah, definitely not. So especially on the heels of the very successful Reagan presidency. So, but
Yeah.
that was our United Presidential Trivia segment, always brought to you by United Cigars, manufacturers La Giana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, the highly acclaimed Atabey, Byron, and now Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living united. Now, another topic that I wanted to bring up here, George, was we talked a little bit about this last year, and I kind of wanted to get into it a little bit more, just a little bit more in depth. We were talking a lot about vitolas last year, but I wanted to talk about blends this year, and specifically like um, re-releases of longtime favorites. I think of like the La Riqueza from Tatuaje, or just reduxes in general, right? And how blends kind of change over time. It just kind of blanket statement, in your opinion, reduxes or re-releases. Is it right? Is it wrong? Should it be done? Should it not be done? Like what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I don't think you can blame cigar companies from wanting to revisit their hits because we're not in a marketplace where people establish one core product like Macanudo used to be, like Monte Cristo used to be for Cuba back in the day. And everybody forms a permanent relationship with it and it becomes their primary smoke and everything else sort of rotates in and out of that. Instead, we're in a what's new phase. So when a company reaches back in their portfolio, and don't forget, to some degree, this sort of became a phenomena that we had to, witness its impact in the marketplace when the FDA um, potential deeming regulations were in place and people were saying, past this cutoff, it can't be, you'd have to submit and go through a whole new testing process. All that went out the window in the end. But there were all kinds of people who said, all right, I have to look back at my catalog and see things that I've done in the past and revisit them in order to remain within that compliance portfolio. And so consumers got used to the idea that manufacturers could revive something which they remembered fondly for the most part. There were a few people who struggled to do this, I think, who were sort of grasping at straws when it came to saying, "Oh, we're re-releasing X." You know, look, no offense to a big company with a long history, but the idea of making a Partagas 160 after the success of the Partagas 150 is ludicrous, and that was a silly, thing to take on. Um, but here's the challenge, if you will. It is very difficult to go back to something that you did 5 or 6 years ago, which became a success based on being something fresh and new, or whether it was something that was just, a natural evolution of the great things that you have been doing. But those cigars like that, in other words, that stick in our memory and go, oh my God, do you remember the first time you had a Camacho Diploma or something like that?
Yeah.
You can't revisit that. you can't restore the experience of the first time that you smoked the Davidoff Special R. You can't revisit because it's impossible to do with the tobacco. You don't have those resources. In some instances, it's because blends have changed. In some instances, it's because tobacco is no longer being grown on those same farms. And in some instances, I think it's actually because the cigar maker is like, I'm not doing that again. I can't actually reproduce that. I think Ernie, one of the greatest things he ever did was the Dark Ritual. You remember those? How extraordinary they
That
were?
that cigar gets mentioned with such reverence, and I never had the opportunity to smoke it. And
Well,
it gets mentioned time and time again, and I fucking missed the bag, man, and it's so sad.
because it was an extraordinary cigar in every respect, every aspect about it. And it was a big, badass cigar, too. By the way, as far as I know, the truth of that cigar is that Lisette blended it, not Ernesto. It
Oh,
was her
interesting.
idea and her concept. Now, obviously, he had a say in assembling the tobaccos that would go into making this run, but it can't be revisited. And we talked about this before. There's no way to go back and do that again. So thankfully, he has not tried to capitalize on that past legendary status by bringing out Dark Ritual 2 or Dark Ritual Redux or anything like that because it's not possible to do. The tobacco, the blends, the resources simply aren't there. He can make something which might be inspired by it, but Ernie is not the kind of guy that has to rely on something like that. He'll just, this is a new cigar. It is catnip, though, for certain people. The smaller the company, the bigger the swing when they do something like this. So, in other words, if you're a little boutique company, and in 5 years ago you had this extraordinary hit with a cigar that came out, and everybody was like, "God, this is a great cigar," and I love them, and they remember them fondly, and they go, I'd love to buy that again. It's hard to criticize a maker for wanting to go back to that kind of success. The problem is that the majority of the time, they're not going to be able to do it. They're not going to be able to deliver that same flavor. They can get in the neighborhood. They
Hmm.
can get something that evokes the spirit of what they were trying to do, but they can't get that particular combination of tobacco which lent that
Right.
cigar its unique properties. And the honest ones admit that and go, okay, here's
Right.
an evolution. This is a successor, as opposed to just saying this is, the return of whatever. It doesn't matter
Well,
because
let's talk about that a little bit, George. And I want to step away for a second. We'll let you expand on your thoughts. I just need a moment here. But I did want to talk about that because I think there are companies that approach this a little bit more with a little bit more transparency, actually a lot more transparency than others.
okay,
George Rico isn't isn't as transparent as some of these other companies, but he's very, I mean, it is a bedrock of his philosophy that he blends to vintages. And it's important
yeah,
to him to like, I mean, even like some of his value-based hits is like the Corojo number 5. Like he talks about this is from this year and this is and there's
those
why.
cigars, they're the best effort that he can make with the tobacco that he
Right,
has right at that moment. And he
right,
says, this is it. This is what it is. I can't do it again.
right.
To my way of thinking, he's been very transparent about about the idea that I make the best cigars that I can in these
Hmm.
lines with the tobacco I have at the moment. But
Right.
don't ask me to do the same thing next year because I'm not going to do it. I'm not
Yeah,
going to have the resources, the
exactly.
circumstances. Listen, I'm always excited to see what's next from George.
Right.
Right. So,
Absolutely.
and I applaud the fact that he openly says, I can't do this again.
Hmm.
Now, the
And there,
thing is, so let me just finish one thing about this and
sure.
then don't lose your train of thought. What's honest about that is that he's saying, I can't do it again, but I'm going to do X. And he brings out something which is the next phase, the next evolution, his next, whatever he's learned from working with particular materials or cigars from a new country, tobacco from a new country that informs a blend, and he moves on. He's not,
Hmm.
and the thing is that none of the things, not every single one of them is a masterpiece. Not every single one of them is the greatest thing he's ever made, but year after year after year, he continues to deliver two things. One, in the baselines, he delivers value every time, and he also gives us original approaches each time. There are cigars that deserve consideration because they're delicious flavors, they're original blends, they what's great about so many of the Gran Habano blends is that they stand on their own. They
Right.
are not beholden to any other brand. They're not inspired by or trying to emulate the success of what someone else is doing. He's letting the tobacco talk to him and making a blend that he thinks is the best expression of that combination. And I'm a fan.
Yeah. I think, and that's like I said, that's been a bedrock of his principle. So if you're a fan of his and you know the history, it's something that you understand when you smoke Grand Habano. Now, there's other
And
companies,
you're not looking you're not expecting the same thing
right,
again. You're interested in, okay, what's the evolution, what's the next thing.
right,
There are other companies that are not that confident. There
right.
are plenty of people out there that don't think like that. They all they want to do is say, hey, you loved this, here it is again.
Yeah, and I think there are two companies that really, that to me, like come top of mind. One more recent, one who's been doing it for years, that put
Mhm.
years on it. Like their transparency is to the point of, hey, here's my cigar, here's the year. So Ferio Tego is one of them with his Elegancia and Generoso. He puts the year on the
Yeah.
footband every single year. And Pete Johnson does it as well too with his Kohonu. He always,
Oh,
and
who
then
knew?
and
2012.
Especials, yeah, 2012,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's that kind of level of transparency as well that is kind of lend to itself. The particularly with Pete, who's been doing it for so long, there's an expectation that this is going to be similar, but it's going to be different, right?
Yeah, but and by the way, that's a boon to collectors. That's a great gift to people who are passionate about the brand and the understanding. They can really embrace um, the variety of the portfolio, and the different experiences that he offers. He can literally say, okay, here's the newest thing in a Kahunu, and here's how I'm going to change it, whether it's a wrapper or some component of the filler or even the binder that they're doing to produce, and they're dated, and you can make your comparisons, and you can go, oh my God, I love that he went back in and filled in a year that he missed in the progression of Kohonu. And that's a gift. That's a gift to passionate fans.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things too, like that you um really come to appreciate from that aspect. So like to uh, and it's worth noting that some of the cigars that we've enjoyed for over the years, and we talked about this when we were talking about Cigar Aficionado and those particular cigars that continue to perform on their top 25 list. Oliva
Mm-hmm.
Melanio always comes
Yeah.
to mind, right? They really love that cigar. They continue to
Mm-hmm.
give it high scores,
Yeah.
because for their mind, their palate, it hits. Now, I like to bring this story up just because one, I think it's comical, but I think it's worthy of note too because I think in retrospect it has changed over time. Now, it didn't change overnight. I
Mm-hmm.
love telling this story. Like when I was working in retail at the time when Drew Estate was acquired by Swisher, and literally that day I had consumers coming in and saying that Liga Privadas tasted different, which was
Yeah.
just asinine and comical. Um,
Right.
but
Because they were smoking cigars that were made before the handover.
before exactly, but I think it is worth noting that particularly with that blend, it was so popular. that over time it has changed, and I wouldn't say necessarily for the worse or for the better, but it's different than the ligas that I remember from years past. But you kind of already made a note of that, George, that like you're not going to be able to capture the ligas that we smoked in 2010, 2011. That's just not, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, but the thing is that there's organic flavor drift that happens because again, you're dealing with the tobacco that's coming through from your farmers, and you're evaluating what's there to work with. But don't forget, the quantities that they produce Liga Privada in today make it virtually impossible to make the cigar that they did when it won such a loyal following, right? In other words, the volume, it's just not, it's not practical.
Right.
And so when you recognize that challenge, and then they actually made a decision based on that, which was about changing the tobacco that would be raised to provide the wrapper. That did produce a line of demarcation where yes, there are different properties. I think they were still true to the spirit of the cigar that they were trying to offer and how they were trying to reward their passionate fan base with the cigars that were there, but it does not change the fact that the flavor, to my way of thinking, everything that I liked about that cigar when it began is not present there now. Now I'm saying
Mhm.
that openly, and that's not necessarily, it's not a criticism of Swisher and their management of the brand or anything that Jonathan has allowed to happen. It's just a function of what's the marketplace is demanding. But it's not the same. The cigar, but that doesn't, to be honest, that change, I believe, is they're a victim of their own success. In other words, the need to produce the volume of cigars that they have demand for, it is it's overwhelming. They can't do anything but do the best, find the tobacco that they can get in sufficient quantities to manufacture the cigar and honor the idea behind Liga Privada. And let's not forget 52,
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah. Um, this is my kind of my last thought.
Was that fair? Does that,
Yeah,
I mean,
I think it's absolutely fair, and I kind of wanted to bring this back up because I had mentioned it during the honorable mention section too, and I've mentioned it in years past. Specifically like with the United Gold Star Limited. I mean, I love that cigar, and I said, like I said it earlier, I said I wish they could find a way to make it regular production. It just may not be possible. Like you
no.
said, that there's certain tobaccos that you have large quantities in and that are produced at a large quantity and you can get from the same farms year over year.
Mhm.
And even then it's different, right? But then there's sometimes where, hey, it's like this Polone, was a pallet that we bought back in 2007 and it's just been sitting there and now it's it works
Mind
with these
blowing.
other
It's
yeah, it works.
fantastic. It's
Yeah, it
great.
works with these other tobaccos, and so lo and behold, boom, bam, bing, bang, boom, you've got your limited
Yeah,
edition cigar. But it's for the cigar enthusiast, it's it's conflicting for me, like because it's like, God, this is so fantastic, like, but at the same time, I think it's also a study in how we should just enjoy the moment, you know.
exactly. That you just said it perfectly. You should embrace what's in front of you now that you're able to do. And by the way, if you love it, go out and buy all of them that you can, because with rare exceptions, when they're made with as much love and attention as these great blends are, they're only going to get better as you
Hmm.
age them. They may not, they're aging. It introduces changes in personality, but they're only going to, for the most part, they're only going to get better. So you're not going to regret having 150 or 200 of these cigars and watching how they grow and change and mature over a 5-year period. But
Hmm.
if you think that you can go back into a store and buy the same name and the same size from the same brand and get exactly the flavor that you fell in love with when you first discovered the cigar, you're in for disappointment.
Absolutely. All right. Well, George, why don't we do 4, 3, and 2? We have one more
Yeah,
topic to cover, and then we'll light up the number one cigar of the year and
cool.
chat about that experience. How's that sound?
Yeah, perfect.
All right.
I'm still
So
enjoying number five though, just for the record.
beautiful. I actually uh I actually just finished my Umbagog bronze back coming in at number 5. And I'm lighting up a number 2 cigar of the year, which we'll talk about in a second. But
Mhm.
we'll talk about number 4, um,
Yeah.
which was I'm there's a silly reason why I'm really pleased about the cigar coming in at number 4, and I'll explain here in a second. But number 4 is um, the Hoya de Nicaragua Cinco de Cinco Robusto Gordo. It has a San Andreas Mexican wrapper. The
Mexican
binder
wrapper.
is actually undisclosed. The filler is Nicaraguan. It's obviously manufactured in Nicaragua at the Fabrica de Tabacos Hoya de Nicaragua factory
Oh, in
in.
Nicaragua.
This is the Robusto Gordo Vitola, which is a 5.5 by 54, so a beefier, Robusto Gordo. Uh,
Mhm.
and uh, and it's a soft press as well, very similar to the Plasencia that finished at number 6. And I just absolutely dig this cigar. I think it's probably one of the more elegant San Andreas examples that I've smoked in recent memory. San Andreas has a tendency to be, really hearty, and this certainly is a hearty cigar. But there's a really nice, beautiful creaminess to it. I really enjoyed the complexity of the blend. Not sure what the binder is. I think that's probably the meal ticket for it, and to why it probably smokes a lot differently than some of the other projects that
Yeah.
Toy de
Well,
Nicaragua has done for the um, in this particular vein. So this is part of the Obras Maestro series. Uh, some of their anniversary cigars fall on this. The Numero Uno is also part of that series as
yeah.
well, and their rebranding and everything. But I love everything about this cigar. I love the way it looks. I love the green emerald label to it. The number 55 can be seen in the Cinco de Cinco if you
Hmm.
turn it sideways.
Hmm.
Um, Celebrating the 55th anniversary of the company itself. And just yeah, I absolutely dig it. Now, the silly thing that I love about this particular cigar placing number 4 is that
Hmm.
a while ago, a long time ago, I had Juan Martinez on on a show of mine, and the following week, Steve Saka was making his appearance, and Juan just got the biggest charge out of that. He's like, "No, usually I'm always after Steve. I always seem to follow Steve." And I had them both on my birthday episode this year, and I mentioned that too, and he remembered saying that. And so I would like to also note to you, Juan, here's another example of where you finish above Steve. So you finished before
Yeah.
Steve. So this is
There
number
you go.
4, the Cinco de Cinco Robusto Gordo from Hoyta, Nicaragua comes in at number 4. Now the number 3 cigar of the year, which you really enjoyed just a few minutes ago,
Yes.
um, is a cigar that I think might just be the very best cigar that this company's ever put out. It's pretty darn close. There's some rivals over the years that I thought was really good. And it's the second time that this particular manufacturer has finished in my top 10. But this is the highest that he has finished. So coming in at number 3. So the on the podium, we're on the podium now. So the bronze medal, if you will, um, and very aptly named the bronze medal because there's some bronze in the labeling here. So this is what you enjoyed earlier, George, was the Room 101 Johnny Tobacconaut 2023, the Robusto format. So this was a re-release. We were talking about this a moment ago of the Johnny Tobacconaut reblended, completely different than the original blend. And as Matt Booth likes to say, this is not really Johnny Tobacco, it's Jonathan P. Tobacco. It's a different iteration, completely different blend. And it's manufactured at the Tabacalera AJ Fernandez Cigars de Nicaragua SA, obviously manufactured in Nicaragua. The wrapper is Ecuadorian Connecticut, as you might have guessed. The binder is
Mhm.
Mexican, and the filler is Nicaraguan. So you gave your thoughts a little bit earlier, George. Was there anything you wanted to add?
Um, I think that cigar is bright and floral and soft, and it's got marvelous aromas. But you have to tell me that my earbud dropped out, and I couldn't hear what you said the name of the cigar was, and I couldn't.
Uh,
I was looking down trying to
it's
fix it.
it's Room 101. Uh,
Oh yeah,
Johnny Tobacco, the 2023 edition. It's
Johnny
the
Tobacco.
mhm,
Yes, Johnny
Robusto.
Tobacco. And so so far, this is the surprise. I'm so glad that it's in there. I'm so glad that you chose it, and I'm really I enjoyed it, and I'm so glad that I got to smoke it because I probably overlooked this cigar 50 times in walking through humidors and stuff. So kudos because I thoroughly enjoyed it. Right down to if it was longer, I could still be smoking it.
What's been your overall impression of Room 101 cigars throughout the years? Because he's gone through, we were talking about iterations, right, and versions and everything. He's changed factories a few times, obviously, and then he obviously sold his company to General STG. Now it's part of Forged, a cigar company, but
Yeah.
the parent is STG and everything. Over the years, what's been your impression of the work that Matt Booth has brought to the industry through his cigars?
I love Matt's energy. I love hanging out with him. Um, I love the the wacky enthusiasm that he brings, and I'm a fan of this sort of uh, cult that is built around. I think the cigars themselves have been wildly erratic. There have been some that were absolutely marvelous, and others that were flat out failures. But in some instances, I think that was because of political aspects that had to do with, changing ownership directives, everything else. So I don't think that it has it does the trajectory of the company has not been either a straight line or a steady ascent. However, they have consistently come up with surprising cigars over the years.
I I agree, and I think that I've loved a lot of Matt's work as well. The Farce Maduro
Mm-hmm.
was the other um, placer for his brand on my list a number of years ago. Fantastic cigar. I've loved a
Mm-hmm.
lot of his reiterations. This is probably my favorite redo of his since he's been over at STG. Like he's redone a couple of other ones. The Daruma comes to mind, etc.
Yeah.
And this is probably my favorite of the remakes, so to speak.
But
Um,
I think these interpretations are better. They are superior executions of the intent of the blend.
I agree. I think that also speaks to the experience that he's gained over the past decade plus.
Mhm.
He's
Mhm.
learning a lot more about, obviously about tobacco, about how tobaccos play together, how they age too.
Mhm.
And but this might very well be my favorite Room 101 cigar that's ever been released. And
Ever.
it comes in at number three for me. Now, number two, I kind of joked that with we've had this happen in the past. We mentioned Cavalier Geneva a couple years ago. It's not really a blind tasting when you can see that gold diamond on the label.
Yeah.
This number two had a unique identifier too. You could probably guess the manufacturer of it, George, but we'll go ahead and kind of get into it. I think you've had the blend, but you may not have
Yeah.
had the vitola yet. You have not smoked the blind one. You just posted it up here, but coming in at
Yeah.
number two, and has been a podium maker the last few times in my top 10 list. But James Brown does it again. We have the Blackworks Studio Killer B Robusto,
Or B.
and it's a traditional 5 by 50 format, obviously produced in Nicaragua at the Oveja Negra factory. And the wrapper is Ecuadorian Maduro. The binder is Nicaraguan. The filler is Nicaraguan. And again, manufactured in Nicaragua at the Oveja Negra factory. The interesting component is that cap that you were showing off a minute ago, which has that kind of bee-like look, very artistic. James has talked about how about how Blackwork Studio has been kind of his playground, his artistic playground. He gets to have a lot
Yeah.
of fun. He does a lot of great things. The Killer Bee, the Green Hornet has been a favorite of mine for a long time as well too. The Swarm, the Cameroon interpretation of his a couple of years back was also really well received. Um, the Shaolin, a bunch of other iterations
Yeah, the
within this
Shaolin.
within this makeup has been some of my favorite cigars. I, I say it time and time again. James Brown does it again. I smoked so many cigars. I was so excited when the Killer Bee got released in additional vitolas. I really love it, and it's interesting. I've got the original Killer Bee here next to me, and when you think about like when you look at the two together, right? This is the original Killer Bee,
Hmm.
and then this
Hmm.
is the Robusto. The Robusto looks
Yeah.
massive.
Also, yeah, it's huge.
It looks huge compared to, but it's just a 5 by
Yeah.
50. And and what I really like about the original Killer Bee is that, again, the flavors really meld well really together in that particular size. But I mean I was a little concerned that the bigger formats would kind of mute the flavors. I don't know why I doubted James at all, even for a moment, because I just think the Robusto is a not to be too punny or whatever, killer cigar.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Just really beautiful, earthy, deep flavors, a lot of coffee notes, a lot of, great dark fruits. Again, deep flavors that really just kind of coat the palate with a nice viscous smoke. The retrohale is deeply complex, long finishing, and it's just a fantastic cigar. So last year, James came in third with this porcelain from Black Label Studio. He moves up a space this year with his Killer Bee Robusto from Blackwork Studio to the number two spot. So congratulations to James Brown for coming up to number two on this. Have you had the Robusto before, George?
I have, and I want to tell you that my apprehension was the same for the simple reason that I thought the original Killer Bee was like this perfect gem of a cigar. I loved it so much. I loved everything about it. I didn't want to. I just I was worried that having a follow up would diminish what was perfect about um, the original. And when I smoked the Killer Bee Robusto, maybe September or October, I was just thrilled. I loved that cigar.
It's wonderful.
It is. I would happily light that cigar up and smoke right now if we were not about to progress to number one.
Right. Absolutely.
Because I love, and to me, there's a tropical fruit flavor that dances around inside that blend that
Hmm.
comes out that is just wild. I love it. I look. I don't know what kind of magic he's working. I don't know, whether he's going to get to a point where he can ever do big releases of stuff like this. But I applaud. I look forward to every release, and I'm just I'm very impressed. And when he was able to produce this bad boy, I was like, man, what a cigar. So I certainly can't argue with your placement.
So let's talk about the placement so far. We're gonna light up the number one cigar here and go through our
Yeah.
last topic before we unveil the number one. So we have coming in at number 10, we have the Ferriotego Suma Torpedo.
Schumer.
We have the at number 9 we have the McAuliffe Blue Robusto.
Mhm.
Number 8, La Roma de Cuba Connecticut Corona. Number 7, the Postania Connecticut Bellicoso. Number 6, the Plasencia 149 Cosecha Azcualpa, which is a Toro 6x52.
Yeah.
Um, Number 5, we have the Umbagog Bronzeback from Dunbarton
On
Tobacco and
back.
Trust. Single release Vitola, basically a Robusto 5x48. Um, Number 4, we have the Hoya de Nicaragua Cinco de Cinco Robusto Gordo.
Mhm.
At number 3, the first podium spot goes to Room 101,
Room 101.
Johnny Tobacconot Robusto 2003 edition. And we just unveiled the number 2 cigar of 2024, being from Blackwork Studio, the Killer Bee Robusto 5x50. And so I'm gonna go ahead and unwrap my number one cigar of the year. Take the labels off. I have another one here to show off here, and when we unveil it in a second. But George, are you ready to light up the number one?
I am. But I'm putting down my Umbagog reluctantly. However, this is a really beautiful cigar too. Let's be clear. That's an impressive. I mean, this is just a stick that you look at and you go, "Oh my God, this is a knife and fork cigar. I know I'm really going to get into this." It's got a.
Beautiful.
It's just. It feels good. It looks good. It's exciting. And now we'll do a little bit on the cold draw. But that's God. What a beautiful cigar. So bright and floral and a little bit sweet on the cold draw.
Yeah, I do. I get the same thing. I get some floral notes. There is some sweetness.
Yeah. Not artificial sweetness, tobacco sweetness,
Not saccharine.
not
Um,
saccharin.
when I first lit the cigar for the first time and I got that floral note on the cold draw, I thought I was very intrigued considering again the manufacturer and everything. I just thought it was something very different from them. Um, and so the right off the bat, I had some kind of significant intrigue. Now, I will apologize to the manufacturer later. This particular one that I'm smoking, because I wanted the more pristine
Uh-huh.
one to show off here in a second,
Right.
I did drop,
Yeah.
and there's a little bit of a crack on the foot that's entirely man-made. My apologies to the manufacturer, but I don't expect it to really destroy the smoking experience I'm about to have. But nevertheless, I wanted to disclose that.
So it's
Um,
a full cabinet round.
yes, yes, it is a Parejo. No soft pressing, no box pressing of any kind.
Nope.
You can tell by the dimensions. It's very Toro or very Toro. It's a 6 1/4 by 52. Um, and we'll unveil it here in just a second. So we'll enjoy this together as we as we go through.
It's, it's got Play-Doh qualities on the light. Wow.
My draw is exceptional.
Yeah. But the flavors are not at all what I was expecting based on the cold draw notes. Wow.
It's interesting you said Play-Doh. I noted that when I out of the many of these I've smoked that
Uh-huh.
there is an aroma that reminds me of like terracotta. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you mentioned Play-Doh. That kind
Hmm.
of comes off of it. So that's interesting that you kind of put that on there. But that's
Hmm.
really good. So let's as we are enjoying this cigar, our number one cigar of the year here, I will we'll talk about our final topic. But before
Hmm.
and then we'll get into our final fun segments, and then we'll do the unveil, and then do a
There you
recap
go.
of our top 10. So the last topic that I wanted to bring up here, George, I mean, PCA this past year was a great experience in a lot of ways, and I thought it was probably one of the in the comparatively few that I know that you've been to and attended, and others as well. But I thought that it was by far probably the best opening ceremonies, if you will. I thought the seminars were the very best that have ever come out, and during these seminars was the latest release of um, Jesse Marriott and Steve Garabine, their hand rolled project. Obviously, the original hand rolled movie was then followed up by the J.C. Newman story,
Yeah.
and they're working on other subsequent stories as well. But this was part one of, I guess,
Hmm.
the Pete Johnson, Don Pepin Garcia story. And you had a pretty big role in contributing to this. And I just kind of wanted to get an overall just impression of what your experience was like working with those guys and what it was like to kind of retell that story, um, and just yeah, your overall experience.
So, first of all, I agree. Let's begin by saying I think the PCA should be acknowledged in the way that they were able to move from the 2023 show in its old time slot to moving forward to the spring dates for the show, which I applaud wholeheartedly. But engineering them together, in other words, that one would follow um, much faster than the normal length of time was quite good. And the show that they put on, I thought was, you know, they passed the test with flying colors. It was a challenge to do, and they met it. And I agree that that opening day. Here's what I regret. I think there was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 or 40% of the people who attended that show who actually didn't make the opening seminars. And as a result, they missed a tremendous day. Now, I will say this what you saw in that screening was just the first cut. It is not the finished version of what the next chapter of Hand Rolled will be. There are changes that are being made, some flex in the storytelling and some of the focus, and there's additional material that will appear. So just because you saw it there does not mean that you can say when the release comes in the next, I don't know, 35 or 40 days, um, I've already seen it. No, it's going to be a different experience. There's
Mhm.
more to the story, and there's a little bit of a coda to it as well. Jesse and Steve are a tremendous team. They're really, really good at what they do, and they're a gift to the business.
You know, after
Working with,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just say after the playing of that, and again, it was a beautiful, just beautifully put together. Even though it was rough, it was a rough cut,
Mhm.
and it did. I found that was what was really unique about the story is they bounced around quite a bit, but they kind of they sewed it all together in a nice,
They
neat
tied it
way.
up beautifully.
Yeah, and after it was all over and the presentation was over and we were taking a break, I was fortunate enough to capture from a distance, I was able to capture a moment between you and Pete Johnson, a very
Mhm.
intimate moment. You were, and I think it, and some of the words might have been private, George, so I don't want to pry too much, but do you remember much about that exchange? It seemed very powerful. You seemed both very affected by it, as did the entire Garcia family as well. Do you remember much about that exchange with Pete?
Yeah, it was very emotional. To me, watching the whole thing was very emotional. Now, look, I'm on screen for a number of minutes in it, and it's always it's an interesting experience to watch how something like that gets edited and presented and everything. But obviously, I'm extremely proud of my relationship with Pete, our friendship over the years and my admiration for how he has grown as a man, as a cigar industry leader. Um, but what I wanted him to know in that moment when, and again, I think the audience was blown away. No one
Mm,
had ever seen anything like that before. In other words, the people who were in that room, and there were probably 500 or 600 people there, were like, wow, oh my God.
mhm.
And there were so many things in that story that came out in an organic way. In other words, you're right that they did, the it wasn't chaptered. It wasn't linear in terms of first Pete did this and then he did this and then he did this. It was much more inspired than that, and it led you on this journey about Pete's desire to do something, how frustrated he had been up to the point that he met Pepin, the way that their relationship unfolded, how the brand was brought to market, and how it was an under the radar project to begin with, and then this flowering of recognition. And look, the fact is that Pete's life was changed by meeting Dumpapine, but their life was changed by the success of Tatuaje and what that allowed Tabacalera Garcia to become. It's really incredible. And so the point that I was trying to make to him there was take a minute and be aware of the adoration that is coming your way, the recognition by your peers of what you have accomplished. And I said, you should, I'm very proud of him, but I told him then that he should be because it's 10 times more uncomfortable for him to have that play out in front of that group while he's sitting there. It's one thing to realize that people are watching it when you're not right there with them,
Right.
but and many, 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 many more people will see it than he was with that day. But there were a lot of people in that audience that know Pete, that have a personal relationship with him, and what they watched unfold on the screen was beautiful. And I just wanted him to take a minute and recognize that he earned every bit of that, and that it couldn't it there's no one else in that room that could tell that would receive the same thing. In other words, that
Mhm.
that the audience would throw their arms around in the same way. And believe me, think about it. Then later in the afternoon, we got to see the sort of restored and reassembled the Padron story. It was a
Mhm.
great day.
Yeah.
All of the things that happened there, Kyle was great. The things that happened as we were talking about tobacco in between, but that moment when Hand Rolled opened up, people were like, "Wow,
Mhm.
this is really, we're literally getting the inside look at tobacco history." So much of our business is around, sort of knowing legends and stories and things that have happened, how brands have taken shape and unfolded, that are legacy, that the origins are all in the distant past. This is happening right as we live it.
Right. I think that I sought out Jesse and Steve after the presentation, and they know that I'm a big fan of their work.
Mhm.
And I said that this, so thus far this has been the best thing that they had done so far. And that's
It's their masterpiece today. I
yeah.
don't believe, I don't, it's entirely possible that they can top it uh, in terms of, sophistication and what they're learning about the tobacco business and what they're learning about themselves as they build these things. But I don't know that they'll ever have anything which is so emotionally resonant that is so powerful to a group of people who are in a position right now, influential leaders in the business who are all, some of the people sitting in that room owe the success of their brands to the ground that Pete plowed first. And that's what that movie is showing people.
Mm-hmm.
And that the fact that it's actually been recorded and saved and presented for the whole world to know, it's more documentation that we've gotten than around almost any brand that you can name. And the fact that as a result, you can now go and have a conversation with Pete on a completely different level because you have been informed about this extraordinary event and the relationship that was forged in one moment in that moment when Pepin recognized what Pete was trying to do with his cigar brand, what he wanted to achieve. It was all in the future. It was all in his head, and Pepin embraced it and delivered him something. And that watching that unfold and the people sitting there describing what happened was really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I was certainly overcome with emotion too. And like you said, there were other things that day that were really great. I thought Nick Melillo's presentation was
Nick's
unbelievable.
was, yeah,
Uh,
but
John,
he had the terrible fortune to follow
no joke, right?
Henry.
Yeah. And John and Ernie too. John Huber and Ernesto Perez
They
Carrillo.
were
Like,
great. They were
yeah.
fantastic.
I mean, the only travesty is I think they were trying to squeeze into 30 minutes, which you could easily sit down with those two for a couple of hours and not even scratch the
No,
surface too, you know?
a couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that story is incredible, and they recognized, where they were, that they were sort of in that pivot moment. Um, but it was, God, it was what a wonderful day.
So, are you planning on, or are there any things in the works for you to continue to work with Steve and Jesse on some future projects too, or was this
Yes.
kind of okay?
No, no, no. We discovered how much we liked working together to shape and to do these things, and they were happy to have somebody that could give them perspective and make introductions and to sort of lay the groundwork to tell a story about what people that were really important to our business could teach them. So it was a love affair. They're very talented, and I stand. Look, I admire the fact that they knew what they wanted to do. They didn't know how to get there, and they found a patron, and being able to produce something which is this important for all of us to know going forward was just it was phenomenal. And there are other things that will happen, but again, like I said, wait till you see the finished version. You're going to
Mhm.
be even more blown away.
Is there a particular story other than the ones that they've already touched on, or maybe ones that we are aware that they're working on? Is there a particular story in the cigar industry that you would love for one day to get told in a similar fashion?
Yeah, but it's harder to do for a variety of reasons. But I think the single and I know exactly who I would go to help me tell this story. But the person that needs to be celebrated as the national treasure that he is, the international treasure that he is the story of Benjamin Menendez.
I thought you might say him. I
Yeah.
thought you might say him. I feel like the last few years his name hasn't been mentioned enough, and I think he's unfortunately falling by the wayside in terms of the memory, but it's I think it's important to keep that kind of memory alive because like I mean he's done some of the most important work. I mean in the same breath you can
That guy's
mention
fingerprints, that guy's fingerprints are all over the cigar business for the last 50 years. And every single important thing that has happened, truthfully, almost every single thing that has happened of import since the revolution and the flowering of the Cuban diaspora, if you will, afterwards, Benji was intimately involved in. He is a titan. He is the single most important living man about the cigar business today in our lifetimes and in the lifetimes of our fathers. He is, and he's criminally underappreciated by the wider group of people that are out there now. There are a lot of people in the cigar industry who know all too well how extraordinarily influential he's been.
You know, it's been well over a decade since the passing of Frank Yaniza. I think of him, I think of Benji Menendez, and of course,
Mm-hmm.
we just recently lost another great in Jose Cejas. Um, Given your history with the cigar in the cigar industry, George, I imagine you probably uh, crossed paths with Jose on a number of occasions. Was there? I wanted to give you the opportunity if there were any stories that kind of came to mind, and in that vein, I wanted to use that as the as an off cursor to our asylum moment where we talk about a cigar that we may have had and smoked in solitude. But as we reflect on some of the greats of the industry, um, in this moment, I thought this would be a perfect time to mention our asylum moment in remembering the great Jose Cejas, and if you had any moments that kind of came to mind.
Yeah, more than one, obviously, but I will say that in the early years of the boom, when nobody understood how explosive and how transformative those early years in the 90s were, and people were, trying to figure out, who are the people that we have to know, that we have to trust, who are we going to get to lead us forward in this disruptive era, and because that's really what it was, explosive growth and all these people becoming involved in the industry, many of whom, we don't have to name names, but many of whom didn't have any business being in it other than naked opportunism. Um, and their energy was good for the business overall anyway. But I was on a plane with Jose. Um, I think I want to say that we were actually leaving um, Puerto Plata at the time to fly back to New York. You had to get the direct flight for that. But anyway, he was not a guy that I knew from my experience in the States, and I had not spent a lot of time in his factory. I'd been there and I was aware of what they were doing and things like that, but I did not have any idea about how deeply he had become involved in transforming the factory, which changed how everybody was looking at the Dominican Republic in the 80s. Um, and we were talking about contemporary things, but he was just he was so humble, and he was just sort of casually tossing off these remarks about stuff that was happening and what they were doing. In other words, how they were trying to counter some of the bad trends that were out there, and what they wanted to do to keep advancing themselves. And he was, God, I was just devastated because I realized, oh, I don't know this guy anywhere near as well as I should, and I'm just blown away by the gems that he was dropping right there, and from that moment, I said, attention must be paid, and this man must be respected at a time when people were trying to manufacture themselves. They were trying to assert themselves as as important people in the cigar business, and he was the exact opposite of that. He did not mind. He didn't want to be, doing the cigar grip and grin. He didn't want to be doing any public events. He wanted to continue to work his magic at the factory. When he was content to let other people involved in that step forward and take credit for things that he was doing. And my God, we are all so lucky that he applied himself in the ways that he did. He was a powerhouse, and his loss is deeply affecting.
He's not the only legendary cigar maker that had kind of a rebirth. We talked about Ernesto earlier, who moved on obviously into creating his own factory at Casa Carrillo, formerly with
La Alianza.
La
La
Alianza.
Alianza before I'm so glad that they renamed it Casa Carrillo.
Um, he Jose Sejas obviously went into a second business coming out of retirement with his son Enrique
Mm-hmm.
with Matilde.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those cigars that he helped guide his son create and probably created some on his own right too,
Mm-hmm.
were I think are some of them probably the most underrated cigars that have come on the market in the last 15 years. Um,
People who knew those cigars and appreciated them for what they were. But in terms of wider recognition in the marketplace and being celebrated for what they were, they're like ships passing in the night. They
yeah,
just came and went. People didn't understand what was being offered to them.
I agree. Interesting. So, um, how is the cigar performing for you so far?
Well, I've got a crack in the wrapper too that I'm sort of negotiating through, but it is burning like a classic Parejo, not exactly razor sharp burn and a tiny little blister. The ash is a little bit flaky, but man, the draw it's just effortless, and the flavors are so gentle, and the qualities that it is evoking. Again, I'm back to that same phrase, the powdery finish on my palate. Just how delicately it lays there. These cigars are beautifully subtle. This is a cigar that you really need to be doing what we're doing right now, which is sitting by yourself and smoking. I don't think I'd want to smoke this cigar, hanging around the fire pit with five guys while we're drinking and eating and horsing around and everything, because it's too great to squander like that.
So, well, I'm glad you're enjoying it, George. So what do you think? Should we do the unveil, or do you want to
Yeah,
enjoy
why
the?
not?
All righty.
No, no, no. It's probably only going to enhance my enjoyment of it to hear the reveal. I just this is a beautiful cigar, uh, and the what the flavor is giving me is, again, remember, we've smoked three different personality cigars as we've done this, but this is a capper. This is really appropriate.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it, George. This is I had a feeling that you might enjoy the cigar. I wasn't sure. We'll get to some of your impressions overall, like we've talked about on some of the other cigars here. And I know that you didn't have a chance to smoke the
I
Cinco
didn't
de
smoke,
Cinco
no,
or the Killer Bee. Um,
or the killer bee, but I believe me, I know the killer bee, so I can only look forward to being able to light that up. It's we're supposed to have a foot of snow here tomorrow, so I'll probably be able to hang out a little bit more.
there you go. So without further ado, the Oloso Fumar takes a top 10 cigars of 2024. He's about to come to a conclusion. With a quick recap, coming in at number 10, we had the Ferio Tego Suma Torpedo.
Sure.
Number 9, we had the McAuliffe Blue Robusto. Number 8, we had La Roma de Cuba Connecticut Corona. At number 7, we had the Postania Connecticut Bellicoso. At the number 6, we had the Plasencia Concession 149 Azcualpa, their soft press Toro, 6x52. Number 5, Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust, Umbagog Bronzeback, Robusto 5x48. A Robusto Gordo coming in at number 4. Juan Martinez, you finished above
One more.
Steve
Yeah,
Saka this year. Jorge de Nicaragua, the Cinco de
I love
Cinco
it.
Robusto Gordo. The first spot on
I
the
love it.
podium goes to Room 101, Matt Booth.
One,
Congratulations. The Johnny
Johnny Tobacco.
Tobacconaut Robusto. James Brown making the list and the podium once again, coming in at number 2. The Blackwork Studio Killer B Robusto. And without further ado, the number 1 cigar for El Oso Fumar Takes of 2024 is the Tatuaje Havana 6 Barroco Blue, number 1 Toro Grande. It is a
Yeah.
shade grown Nicaraguan Corojo 99 wrapper. The binder is Nicaraguan, double binder, obviously coming from my father,
Mhm,
triple cap.
mhm.
Filler is also Nicaraguan. Country of origin is obviously Nicaragua. The factory is my father's cigar factory. So my father's cigars produced 2 of my top 10 cigars out of their factory. It is the number 1 size, which is a 6 1/4 by 52. You
Yeah.
call, um, and its MSRP is $12. And what's interesting of note, and I didn't actually put this correlation together until actually just a couple of days ago, as I was kind of tallying everything up and looking at stuff and making notes and preparations for tonight's show.
Mhm.
The last 2 number 1 cigars of the year have shade grown Nicaraguan Corojo wrappers. So George Rico last year, with his 20th anniversario, had a shade grown Nicaraguan Corojo wrapper. I don't know
Shade
if
room.
yeah, I'm not sure if it was the 99 varietal. That part is left to be determined. That wasn't necessarily disclosed by him.
Wasn't
But
disclosed.
but uh but yeah, there is some similarity in the wrapper as well. So um yeah, no Peruvian, no Colombian for those floral notes, but the blend is just sensational to me. Very elegant, like you said, very subtle and delicate. There's a lot
Yeah.
of beautiful nuance to this. Um, I know you're a big fan of the Escasos blend, which also has some of those delicate flavors and complexities.
Mhm.
This is obviously a different blend and a different experience. But I know you're a fan of Pete's work. We were just talking about him a moment ago. Just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about this particular cigar. I know you've had it before. Um, so
Many times.
so now that
I,
did you have a pretty good inkling about what it was as you kind of went into it, or
no, when I lit it up, I recognized the flavors because I love this cigar. I love the Viracu. I think these are so I'm going to say something, and this is very corny. It's almost a no-no to say about any modern cigar. But these cigars have a very old school Havana-esque property to them. These are a throwback to a style of Cuban cigar that they don't make anymore. And they're just lovely. There's so much um, soft clay. They're evocative of the soil that they're grown in. I just I love this tobacco. I love the aroma of these. When somebody lights up one of these, if I'm hanging out, and somebody next to me lights up one of these cigars, I smell it and I go, I got to smoke that. It's like it's this instant like sense tease that just you go, man, whatever that is, I want to smoke it because it's extraordinary.
I man, I was a fan of the original Havana 6. I thought that blend was really great, and there was a lot of different vitolas that came out with it, but this
Mm-hmm.
this one particularly just really stood out for me from the get, and I really have enjoyed it since its release and since I had the first opportunity to smoke it. Um, it's a cigar that I just kept going back to, kept smoking, as I mentioned before. Gone through boxes. I've got another box here that I'll be opening after I finish this other one that I have. But there's the box, and
Hmm.
this one is stamped from August of 2022, so some good age on it. Love
Hmm.
Garcia tobacco and Pete's blends
For
when they've got a little bit of
identifying.
age. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, when you put a little bit of age on his stuff tends to age like fine wine, which is
Yeah.
always really good. Um,
But this
I
is
just really,
this is a simple, straightforward thing of beauty. It's got so much flavor. It's not. There's nothing. This is not a hidden reveal or any surprise. It's just a delight from the moment that you light it.
yeah, I don't think, yeah, I wasn't blown away by in the sense of like really just kind of like I've had that experience with cigars and even some of my top 10 cigars in the past were just like, when you light it up, you're just like blown away. Like there's this
Hmm.
instant like just surprise. Like how could it
Hmm.
possibly be this good? That's to your point, George.
Yeah.
This is not one of those cigars. You have some inkling of it because of the history of the red label of Tatawahe.
Yeah.
So you kind of knew what you were kind of getting yourself into, but this expression of that blend and the subtleties and changes that he made and how they all come together. Him and Don Pepin have put together a marvelous blend that's
Hmm.
certainly worthy of number one on my list. Um,
Yeah.
excited to see it. This is surprisingly, this is actually Pete's first appearance in my top 10.
Hmm.
Which might be criminal to use a word du jour that you've been saying lately, George. But
Yeah.
I've been a fan of Pete's work for a long time. Um, there's particularly his work with Sumatra. That's always kind of been my joke. This isn't a Sumatran piece of work for him, but I've I've always said that I think that Pete gets a lot of credit for his work with Broadleaf. I don't think he gets enough credit for his work with Sumatra. And then
No.
he shows right here that he can do also stuff with Corojo as well.
Corojo.
Um, so
And don't forget, don't sleep on the stuff that he's done with Tuxla, with
oh
Center
yeah,
Grace recently.
absolutely,
Great blends. Great
absolutely.
blends.
Mexican experiment earlier before that. Yeah, just some
Fantastic.
great stuff. Um, so that is our top 10 cigars of 2024. Uh, with of course the number one cigar being the Tatawahe Havana number six, Verico
Hmm.
Blue. Uh, number one, the Blackwork Studio Killer Bee Robusto coming in at number two. Room
Number two.
101, Johnny Tobacconot Robusto number three. Number four, Hoya de Nicaragua Cinco de Cinco Robusto Gordo number four. Umbagog Bronzeback from Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust number five. Number six, the Plasencia Cosecha 149 Azcualpa number six. Number seven, Postania Connecticut Bellicoso. Number eight, La Roma de Cuba, Connecticut, Corona. Number nine, McAuliffe Blue Robusto. And number 10, Ferio Tego Suma Torpedo. So that is our top 10 cigars for 2024, everybody. Thank you so much for everyone who kind of stayed by for the list. We've got one more question before we conclude our show. It's always our curveball segment. Can't have it without this. Brought to you by Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust. Fastballs or curveballs, it doesn't matter since the company's inception. Steve Saka has been knocking them out of the park. 9 consecutive years. He's looking for number 10, people. It's coming here in a couple of weeks, but according to him, it won't.
Hmm.
But Steve's always been self-deprecating that way. But regardless,
Hmm.
congratulations to our good friend, Mr. Steve Saka. So, George, I know you didn't smoke all 10 yet, but you do have a history with a few that you didn't smoke. Um,
Hmm.
I wanted to put it to you. Again, this is my list. This is just an exercise that we do every year. I know you were a big fan of the Plasencia and a couple of the other cigars. The McAuliffe Blue really stood out to you too. Is
Yeah.
there anyone that you feel like should have moved up or should have moved down, in your opinion, if you were rearranging these 10 cigars for yourself?
Well, I certainly wouldn't move off of number one. And based on my enthusiasm for Blackworks, I can't argue with number two. And as you've heard me say here tonight, describing smoking it while we were watching, I really enjoyed the Johnny Tobacco. um, I can, again, this is a little bit personal, but I would say maybe the biggest leap that I would make is that again, this is strictly because of um, personal bias in terms of the style. It has nothing to do with my fondness for Michael. I would switch number five and number 10. I would move the Suma to number five and the Umbagog to 10.
Okay. Yeah, I know that I know that you're a fan of Quesada's factory, and there's a lot of good stuff that comes out of there. And this particular, I think, is a standout blend for them.
It's
Um,
phenomenal.
I was really I was the cigar aside, I was even before I even tried it, I was really excited to see Michael expand the Ferio Tego
Yeah.
brands. Because
Portfolio.
yeah, the portfolio itself, his he took over some brands from his former company, Nat Sherman, and for the brief history that Ferio Tego's existed, he's been kind of reintroducing that stuff to the market, getting people reacquainted
Hmm.
with it, making sure the blends are consistent and everything like that. And along the way, he's been working on his own stuff, which is that has kind of got me the most excited. Um,
Yeah.
I was a fan of the Generosos and Elegancia,
Yep.
as they were kind of released, but I was really anxious and hoping that he would have a regular production at some point. And the Sumo, of course, came to be, and I'm thrilled that it did not disappoint.
Mm-mm.
And that's why it comes in on my list at number 10. So, um, but that was our top 10 cigars of 2024. This is our third year having this exercise, having George Brightman, the great George Brightman, joined us in this wonderful blind tasting exercise where I send him all 10 cigars, blind, labeled 1 through 10. He gives me his thoughts, and this is just a great exercise. It's a lot of fun. Um, and any
By
final
the
thoughts,
way,
George? Yeah, please.
yeah, I think consider the breadth of the portfolio of cigar makers that we just embraced.
Hmm.
The mix of young and old, tradition, countries of origin, and the different styles that they're able to evoke. That is as good a look at how exciting the time to come in the cigar market that we're in right now is. That you have, uh, you know, people like Herklots and Steve doing things with James Brown doing stuff with Blackworks, Ernesto and John Huber continuing to do the things that they're evolving, the stuff that Matt is trying to, keep a traditional company evolving into new territory. These are fantastic. And then, listen, Pete is a blessing for everybody in the business because his success continues to inspire people.
Yeah, this list in terms of country of origin, 8 of the 10 were manufactured in Nicaragua, one was manufactured in the Dominican, and one was manufactured in Honduras. Um, 3 Connecticut's were featured. The
Yeah,
La Roma de Cuba, Connecticut, Posani, Connecticut, the Room 101, Johnny Tobacconot. And that's,
yeah,
I when I started this list in 2017, I can honestly I can see a progression and a change in my own palate
yeah.
because at the
In your
time,
palate,
yeah, at the time, Connecticut Shade was something that I didn't necessarily gravitate towards very
you look down on
consistently.
it, right? You look down on it as the it's the wrapper for starter cigars.
Yeah, I would, I, there was a time, George, yeah, to be completely candid, there was a time that I did look down on the wrapper. In 2017, I think I had moved past that a little bit, um, and kind of was starting to really appreciate it a little bit as just in time too, because that was right around the time that I we really saw a Connecticut renaissance in the industry. People were
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
re-embracing it and putting their own spin on it, and I was kind of along for the ride and certainly enjoyed it. But it allowed me to go back to a lot of those classic Connecticut's,
Yeah.
Ashton White, for example, and other things that where I was able to appreciate them a lot more. So the emergence of Connecticut shade over the years on my list has been something of note. Interesting. I've constantly noted that the Bellicoso torpedo figurado format is not something I gravitate towards. I've had two number one
It's not your
cigars.
choice. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had two number one cigars that have been that format. You know, the Christoph
Yeah.
Vengeance Perfecto and the EP Carrillo Encore Valientes are figurado Bellicoso torpedo
Yeah.
formats. And then this year I had two of those varietals in my top 10. So um, it's really good to see um, that when I started this project 7 years ago, I wanted a nice variety. I wanted to stay as open-minded as possible. I knew there was going to be bias because that's inherent,
Hmm.
um, and everything over the years, but I wanted to see that if I could truly continue to smoke as much as I was smoking, enjoy a nice variety of things that I was still enjoying. Because like I always claim that I smoke everything and I enjoy everything.
Yeah.
And I think while there's some things that are trending on my list, three of the Connecticut Wrapper, for example, there's still enough
Hmm.
variety in this list that I feel comfortable with saying, you know what, I do appreciate and I still very much have a varied palate and I enjoy a lot of different cigars, on a very frequent basis.
You know, yeah, you're lucky that you get to experience all of these different approaches and that you can smoke as widely as you do because that informs your ability to evaluate the best of the best. Here's what I would suggest. You think about this. Next year, why don't we do a two-parter? And let's make it that I will assemble what I think are the top 10 limited edition, you know, extraordinary cigars that fall outside the bounds of your parameters
Okay.
that are worth considering in opposition to the top 10 that you put.
Okay.
So in other words, we could visit two, and we'll do the reverse of this. I'll take on the things that are not in the parameter that are store releases or super limited edition or TAA PCA can't really fit into that because it's so broad. But what I'm saying, we'll take that. So we'll take these other cigars that might be worthy of people identifying and knowing how rare and unique they are and what was offered in the market and look at them as a counterpoint to your top 10, which is the stuff that's in the marketplace that's we can look forward to smoking again and again and again.
I love it. I'm up for the challenge. Absolutely. We can talk
Cool.
about a little bit more in detail about how
Mm-hmm.
that will play out, but I absolutely love
Mm-hmm.
that. Let's book it for sure.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I'm down.
this would be two shows, you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we do them, maybe a week or 2 weeks apart, and we'll do the same thing. In other words, it'll be a mirror image. I'll send you the package, and I'll guide the release schedule, and we'll
Perfect.
look at it from the point of view of exactly the same thing, applying the same standards of excellence and what they represent in terms of where the cigar market is and what's happening and what's out there for consumers.
Love it. Love it. Let's do it.
All
That
right.
sounds great to me. Well, awesome. Well, a special note of thanks to all of our audience that stayed up late with us as always. Keep those likes,
Mhm.
shares, and comments. Keep them coming. You can always check us out live almost every Sunday night on Facebook, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. And we go into the wee hours of the morning as we've done tonight. We've got a great cast of characters coming up on our schedule to kick us off into 2025. Um,
Cool.
you can always check out our YouTube channel as well. And we our YouTube channel is always brought to you by Foundation Cigars. Foundation Cigars is relying on their principles, of course, of quality and consistency. And after 20 years in the business, Nick Melillo has put together some of the most unique and broad spectrum portfolio of cigars on the market today. If you are listening to us wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or wherever you listen to podcasts, you're listening to us courtesy of Grand Habano Cigars. Honest, compassionate, great cigars for the market. Be sure you download, subscribe, and review today. If you already are a subscriber, do me a favor, hit unsubscribe, but don't forget to hit resubscribe because that actually
There you go.
improves my numbers and actually
Makes
helps me
better.
helps me continue to get great guests like George whenever I want, which is really nice.
Hmm.
Constructive feedback is always welcome. I do appreciate the gentleman who said that he liked my show, but my audio level sucked. So I've been working on that. That is constructive feedback for the guy who gave me a 1-star review and put nothing.
Yeah,
Um, that does nothing for me. So I'm sorry. But for the gentleman who
sure.
said my audio level sucked, that's something we're working on. So hopefully the audio levels have been better since you made that comment. Hopefully you're still listening. And hopefully for all
Yeah,
my many listeners who are continuing to listen, they're enjoying the audio levels currently as well, too.
there
So
you
without
go.
further ado, we put to bed the top 10 cigars of 2024 from Elos Fumar Takes. Congratulations to Pete Johnson and the Garcia factory for the Tatuaje Havana #6 Verico Verico Blue #1. It is my #1 for 2024.
Yeah.
So he of course is George Brightman. I'm Bear Duplessis live from the Alec Bradley Studios of Azle, Texas. Guess what, everybody? See you next time.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Really well done. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I when the numbers played out and everything and all the tally marks were settled, I